What a weekend of fights. Welcome to another exciting episode of Submission Radio. It's December 7th. It's almost Christmas holiday time. I'm Dennis Gradov. I'm here with Kasper Rosalowski. A big show for all you guys out there at home right now.
Yeah, we are definitely getting into the Christmas and the season spirit, and it was a huge show that just finished literally, I think, an hour or so ago. UFC 181. Plenty of stuff to talk about, and we also come bearing gifts. Big guests. We've got none other than Iaquinta. We have CB Dollaway talking about his fight against Lyoto Machida. We've got Mark Hominick talking about his retirement, a whole bunch of things. And we have Nate Diaz's manager, Mike Kogan. We want to get his thoughts on what's going on with Nate Diaz, the Reebok deal. There's a lot to talk about. We've got a big show for you.
That's right, guys. Me and Casper break down CM Punk. Who knows pro wrestling better than us? A couple of guys who used to be into it a whole bunch of years ago. We know all the background stuff, and we'll talk about our thoughts about CM Punk joining the UFC and what's next for him as well. So stick around to hear us discuss that. As always, Submission AUS is the Twitter. Make sure to follow us. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming out on Twitter. The YouTube channel, youtube.com/Submission Radio AU, has the Technique of the Week come out every Wednesday here in Australia. Make sure you check it out on YouTube. There's always a lot of great stuff coming up. We've got a lot of great wrestling techniques coming out soon as well, and a lot of great content coming for you guys.
Lots and lots of stuff. I really couldn't have said it better. Let's not screw around, guys. If you like, obviously, the video, like it, subscribe it. Without further ado, I think it's time for our first guest. Our next guest is coming off a big win over Ross Pearson at UFC Fight Night 55 Sydney, and has another big fight coming up at UFC 183 against Joe Lauzon. He is none other than Raging Iaquinta. Al, welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks a lot for having me.
Awesome. So it's always a pleasure. Now, Al, the big question is, it's more important than any other one is, have you swam with sharks yet? You said you were going to do it in Sydney. Have you put jaws in a rear naked choke yet?
I did just about everything, but I didn't get to swim with the sharks, so it looks like I'm gonna have to go back to Australia.
Well, that's good. What did you do when you were in Australia?
Well, we were in Sydney for the fight, and then after the fight, went up to Byron Bay, did a lot of surfing there. Thankfully, there was no sharks there.
Yeah.
And, then I went up to the Great Barrier Reef, and I did the scuba diving and snorkeling and stuff. Checked out the Great Barrier Reef. So Australia was awesome, man. It was great.
Awesome, Al. Now, after your big win over us in Sydney, you got on the mic and you said, I'm going to suplex a kangaroo. I'm going to put jaws in the camel clutch. I'm going to make lightweight division humble. Some people may have not gotten the subtle reference from the Iron Sheik. Tell us, what is it about the Iron Sheik that you love? What is it about the Iron Sheik that we all love?
The Iron Sheik, he tells it how it is. There's no bullshit with the Iron Sheik. And if the Iron Sheik tells you to make the lightweight division humble, that's what I got to do. So that's what I'm going to do.
Awesome. Now, first, I guess, start of making the lightweight division humble, you'll be fighting Joe Lauzon at UFC 183. First of all, how does it feel to be fighting on the same card as Anderson Silva and Nick Diaz?
Yeah, no, that's crazy. I didn't even find that out until, maybe a couple days after I accepted the fight. I was just, they just told me Joe Lauzon, UFC 183. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then someone said, oh, isn't that the Anderson Silva Nick Diaz card? And I was like, oh, man, that's awesome. So it's really exciting. And, I'm just training hard, getting ready to do it.
You were talking to us. You were talking to us about how you enjoyed having a short training camp going into UFC Sydney. Are you sort of happy that this fight is coming up pretty soon after your last win?
Yeah, no, this is again perfect. I came out of that fight with no injuries, and I took like 2 weeks off, and I'm just starting to get back into it now. Probably just still take it easy, and then when we're about like 6 weeks out, that's when we really turn it up and put the finishing touches on, getting ready, and get out there fight week, and that's it. Business as usual.
That's it. And Lauzon is a veteran. He's been around the block for quite a while now. What are some of the strengths that you feel that you have over him?
I think I've been working real hard. I think everywhere the fight goes, I'm gonna have I'm gonna have an advantage. I think he's very good on the ground, so definitely you want to be weary there. But I train with some of the best guys in the world, and at Sarah's Jiu-Jitsu, and if it goes to the ground, I think I'm going to have an advantage. Standing up, I know I have an advantage. Wrestling-wise, I know I have an advantage. So I think this is going to be a good fight for me.
Now, Joe's a tricky guy who's got a lot of out of nowhere finishes and wins. Do you feel as though this may be more of a scrappy, ugly kind of fight, maybe a fight of the night, perhaps?
Everyone's been saying fight of the night, and that's, I mean, if it gets fight of the night, that's good. But I don't want the fight of the night. That's not what the goal is. The goal is to go in and have a flawless victory. Uh, you know, technically superior, dominating your opponent. That's what I'm in there to do. So, if fight of the night comes, it's great. But usually the fight of the nights, they're kind of sloppy. I think the really really good fighters, they dismantle their opponent and they win the fight of the night bonus by themselves. But I don't know. Joe Lauzon wins a bunch of bonuses, so I think when I beat him, they're just gonna give him a bonus anyway.
Well, yeah,
I'll get one, but he'll get one.
You say you have the advantage pretty much everywhere, the feet, the ground, everywhere. In your last fight against Ross, people predicted that you might take the fight to the ground, and yet you ended up getting that spectacular TKO finish. Where do you see most of this fight taking place? On the feet or on the ground?
I haven't even really thought that much into it. I'm still just training for me, just getting myself better every day. And then as it gets closer, the fight starts standing, and I think I'm going to have an advantage there, so I don't see why it can't end there. But as I get closer, I'll watch more film on him, and I'll really, get to, see where I visualize the fight happening.
Now, on the opposite side of the coin, Joe has a lot of sneaky submissions that he's won fights with. Who do you think has the edge on the ground in this fight, Al?
Well, he definitely has, some sneaky submissions. I don't think anyone's seen half of what I can do on the ground, and hopefully, this would be a great fight to show it.
Well, speaking of, not necessarily seeing some of the things that you can do, people refer to you as the lighter version of Chris Weidman. How does that make you feel, given where he is at the moment, being the champion in the middleweight division?
Yeah, no, that's a tremendous compliment because, I see what the guy does in the gym every day, and, it's what everyone aspires to be. So it's definitely a huge compliment, and, I appreciate it for sure.
Now, you got a big win over Ross Pearson in Sydney, a win over Joe. Where do you think that puts you in the lightweight division, Al?
One step closer to making them all humble. I don't know. There's so many good lightweights out there. I just got to keep climbing the ladder and get out there, get people seeing me, and get a following going. That's how it seems this thing's going nowadays. You got to get that following, and then you get your title shot, and then the rest is gravy. But I'm just focused on Joe Lauzon right now.
One of your few losses, it was a while back now, it was to Michael Chiesa at the Ultimate Fighter finale. Michael's obviously the man that Joe recently beat. However, Michael was doing pretty well up until that fight was stopped due to that cut. Did you watch that fight, and did you take anything from that fight that that Michael did as tools against Joe?
I'm gonna have to watch it again. I watched it. I fought the same night. I watched it after my fight.
Mm-hmm.
But my first, I remember my thoughts were just that it was kind of a sloppy fight. They were kind of just just standing there brawling style, and that's not my style. So I think if that's if that's the style that Joe Lauzon's coming in the fight thinking it's going to be that kind of fight, I don't think so.
The Al that we've seen in the octagon today is, so much more evolved than the one that fought Michael in that first fight. Do you feel like if you guys fought again, you could beat him in the rematch?
I don't. The guy you saw fight the first time wasn't the guy. I was better before. I'm better after. It's just no one. That fight was just absolute garbage. It was. He caught me in a good position. He got me. It was one of those things. But it was. That's my fight any other day of the week.
Now, Al, we also wanted to get your thoughts on these new uniforms that the UFC have released. Have you heard much about how they'll be affecting you?
I haven't heard anything about how they'll affect me. No one's told me a thing. I just read a little thing that we got uniforms now, so it's cool. I don't really know too much about it. I mean, it takes a lot of stress off guys that need to really look for sponsorships and stuff, I guess. I can't comment too much on it because I don't really know. I don't know how much I'm going to be getting paid and what kind of deals I'm going to be able to do outside of of the cage and stuff. So I think time will tell. Hopefully it works out and it's really good for everybody. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Definitely takes the stress off people deciding what they're going to wear to the fight nights and the press conferences. UFC Embedded 3 had Robbie Lawler looking for a pair of pants for pretty much the whole episode. So it's good to know that he'll be looked after when these sponsorships kick in. Now, Al, one of your advancements isn't just, technically, it's also the fact that you've been, speaking a lot more to media and you've been a lot more open. Is that one of the advancements that you feel you've made over the last sort of year, really sort of speaking more to the media and talking more your mind to the media?
Yeah, I think so. I'm starting to enjoy it. I'm definitely enjoying it, so it's good. I enjoy looking back at the interviews and seeing the comments on the bottom, see what people say. That always cracks me up. So yeah, I'm definitely enjoying this whole thing and get more into it. Yeah, I used to hate doing interviews and stuff, but yeah, definitely not anymore.
Really? I'm curious. What did you hate about it?
I don't know. I think I hated it. Not just I didn't like talking about myself maybe, and now I realize you got to do it. You got to I'm a pretty cool dude. Everyone's got to see what's up.
Well, you're gonna enjoy this one because we got the Submission Radio tap out round where it's basically all about you. Bunch of fun questions, and you answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. All right.
Sounds good, man. Let's do it.
All right. What is your favorite food in the world?
Food, ice cream cake. Didn't you ask me this last time?
Yeah, we did. Shit, we should probably do our research better, Al. Sorry.
Long Island to Sydney. What was the biggest difference that stood out to you?
Biggest difference, Long Island to Sydney, the trains and the metro. I don't know what you guys call it over there, but it's so much cooler. You guys got the seats that they switch over so you can go on both sides and whatnot. The trains over there are awesome.
Wait, so you rode the metro in Sydney?
Oh yeah, every day we went to the UFC gym from Circular Key, and yeah, we took it down and got off the train walking. I'm like a native Sydneyan now, man.
You'd think they'd have like a long limousine driving you around Sydney, not like, hey Al, here's a couple of tokens, catch the train to the gym.
And what was that?
We got there early, so we were there before. I got there like 3 or 4 days before anyone even got there from the UFC. I got there early just to acclimate and check out Sydney. So it was good to, we just got on the train. Where's the gym? Got some training in. It was fun.
What was that like when people saw you and they were like, Jesus, there's Chris Weidman, there's Matt Serra, there's Iaquinta, Ray Longo and the gang. Did you get any wild looks?
No, the fans out there definitely follow the sport because everyone was getting stopped. Usually Matt gets stopped, and gets stopped the most. I guess Chris is, Chris to everyone. But no, yeah, they love MMA in Australia. It's awesome. And I hear that Melbourne just got, they just got the cage now.
Yeah, huge deal for us. The change of government, now the cage is going to be legalized. And if all sources are correct, then we're going to have a really big show in like a 50,000 plus seater stadium in November. I believe November the 15th. So that's going to be huge.
Yeah, 100%. I want to fight on that card. That's definitely something I want to do, and I'll see the Sharks after that.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you what. It will be probably the biggest UFC show ever. It's going to be bigger than the one that they had in Canada. Let's say you do get onto the card, Al. Tell us who would be a dream opponent for that one for you.
A dream opponent.
This is a year from now, so heaps can change.
I don't know, man. A rematch with Joe Lauzon. I don't know.
Well, what was back to the tap out round? What's your favorite Iron Sheik moment?
Yeah, it's the Joe Lauzon fight, so I don't know. Good. What was that? Tap out round?
Favorite Iron Sheik moment.
Favorite Iron Sheik moment. When he was on Howard Stern one time, he launched a beer bottle at this guy.
Doesn't surprise us at all.
And then some wrestling stuff when pretty epic when he had the Hulk Hogan in the camel clutch. It's pretty crazy stuff.
Now, Al, you have to explain this tweet to us from November 28th. This is what you said. Texting happy Thanksgiving to girls you haven't seen in a while doesn't work. What's going on here?
Well, that one was before I said, we should stop the whole. Everyone text Happy Thanksgiving, I spent an hour on my phone texting everyone Happy Thanksgiving. It was pretty annoying. And then I was like, we should stop this whole texting Happy Thanksgiving thing. It's ridiculous. I'm on my phone all day. And then I was like, well, I do text girls that I haven't seen in a while. Happy Thanksgiving, try to rekindle a little something.
Yep.
But it never works. It never works. They're just like, oh, hey, thanks. All right, bye.
That's a shame.
Gotta try, right?
Hey, man's got to eat. That's what you got to do, What's the one thing in the world that you do better than Chris Weidman?
The one thing I do in the world better than Chris Weidman?
Could be anything. It can be video games. It could be anything.
I'm gonna say I definitely surf better than him.
Take that, Chris.
Now, did you and Matt Serra manage to find a decent pasta place in Australia while you were over here?
We did. We found a real good place. I forget the name of it. The guy actually ended up coming to the owner was a nice guy. Ended up coming to the fight the next night. We had dinner with. We were right across the other table from Marcus Brimage.
Oh yeah. So
we were all eating in there after the weigh-ins, and we always do Italian food after. So we got some Italian food, and this guy, was from Italy, I guess, and he was talking to everybody, became good friends, and he ended up coming to the fight. So it was good.
Awesome.
Good Italian food. I wish I knew the name of it. I'd give him a shout out, but I forgot.
That's all right. Now, I know you said you rode the trains and the metros, but when you guys do travel in the car, when you, Matt Serra, Ray Longo, and Chris Weidman travel in a car together, do you ever play the Sopranos theme song?
That was my entrance song 2 fights ago, right?
Yeah.
Pretty cool entrance song, isn't it?
It's a very cool entrance song. Give us your New Year's resolutions for 2015, Al. Everybody's got some. Give us a couple of yours.
Man, I don't know. New Year's resolution.
One of them is stop texting Happy Thanksgiving to girls. Give us another one.
Stop texting Happy Thanksgiving. What do I need to stop doing? I don't know.
You can start doing something.
New Year's resolution. I'll probably stop drinking alcohol because it's like a month before my fight. So I'll probably have cut it out then. But then after the fight, I'm probably gonna go crazy again. So that's not really New Year's resolution, is it?
No, not really. Yeah.
You're halfway there. Now, Al, the Submission Radio marketing department has finally gotten some more work again, and they have been given the assignment of creating a name for you had you become a pro wrestler. They came up with 3, and you've got to choose your favorite, all right?
All right, that's cool. All right, cool.
So we've got, this is obviously if you're a wrestler, the Cruiserweight Humbler. Yep. AI Punk. Or the Platinum Sheik.
I'm going to go with the first one.
The Cruiserweight Humbler?
Cruiserweight Humbler, I like it.
All right, awesome.
Now, since you're on the same card as Silva and Diaz, it's only right that we get your prediction, Al. Who's winning and how?
Man, I don't know. I'm gonna go with Nick Diaz. I'm gonna say a late stoppage, fifth round.
Very interesting. The more important prediction, however, is you and Joe Lauzon. How are you beating Joe Lauzon at UFC 183 on January 31st?
Devastating victory. Make all the lightweights humble and go out and drink a beer.
There you go. Hopefully it's a VB beer or a Foster's beer after your trip here in Australia. Guys, you can follow Al at Iaquinta and watch him take on Joe Lauzon at UFC 183 January 31st in the US and obviously February here in Australia. Al, thank you so much for popping onto the show. And it was a pleasure seeing you here in Australia. I think you really blended in. You might be an honorary Australian now. Next time you come in, we'll have to definitely show you more around Melbourne because it's going to be legal now.
Sounds good, man. I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait. I
awesome.
appreciate it.
Don't forget to check out Al on Twitter at Al Iaquinta. Al, thanks so much for stopping by the show.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Hey, this is Alistair Overeem, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
Our next guest is known by fans around the world for the great battle he had with Jose Aldo and the amazing career he had inside the cage. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to say that Mark Hominick is on Submission Radio. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure to have you on the show, Mark. Now, like Dennis said, you obviously had that amazing fight with Jose Aldo. Before we get into it, we want to talk about your career. It's been a couple of years since you retired. Tell us, what have you been up to, and what have you been dedicating your time to now that your retirement, from MMA has kicked in?
Well, first and foremost, it's my family. I have two little girls, so that's been my, my main focus. But aside from that, I'm still heavily involved in the sport. I run a gym, adrenaline training center. So I coach, I teach, I'm around the sport all day and every day. And, this is my passion and this is what drives me every day. So definitely heavily involved. The only thing that's really changed is I'm not competing. I'm still in the gym helping guys prepare, train, coach. But, I definitely on that side of the role now.
Absolutely, Mark. We want to have a chat about what you're doing now. Before we get into that, we just want to go back in time just a little bit. Fans that are casual or just got into the sport recently, you may not remember, but you were actually a part of a pretty interesting UFC card back in the day. It was called UFC 58, which was USA versus Canada, where you beat Yves Edwards in the second round with an arm triangle. Also had GSP versus BJ Penn in the card. Just looking back on that event, Mark, what was it like being a part of the UFC back then, especially because the concept was very interesting for the card?
Yeah, I was lucky to get on the card. At that point, I think I was a 7 or 8 time Canadian champion. So at the time, my manager was thinking, if they're having a UFC versus Canada card, there's no way that I couldn't be on that, because I defended the title so many times. But at that point, they didn't have featherweight. So I was the featherweight champion, 145 pounds here in Canada since 2002 at that point. So it had been 4 years. So I had to go up in weight class, but I definitely, jumped at that opportunity, to fight the number 1 ranked guy at a weight class ahead. And, luckily enough, I came out with a victory. So that was a huge opportunity. And that was, my first step, on the big stage.
And just to clarify, Mark, obviously we didn't see you in the UFC or back in the UFC for another few years. Was that because they didn't have a featherweight division at the time?
Yeah, like I thought I was going to be the world champion at 145 pounds, and to me, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to fight the best at my weight class, and at that point, the UFC didn't have that. My teammate Sam Stout he made his debut also on that card, UFC 58, and he was fighting a lightweight. So we've always fought in separate divisions. So I felt that was his to take over. And in mine, I thought, I compete against the best at 145, and that was outside of the UFC.
Back then, did you have a conversation with Dana, or did your management have a conversation with Dana and ask him, well, how long will it take to have a featherweight division in the UFC, or was it something the UFC wasn't even thinking about back in those days?
At that point, that was the first time they had introduced the 155-pound belt back. So you knew it was going to eventually happen, but things in step, because I'm sure guys, when they brought the 145 division over to the UFC, the guys who were fighting, say, at 135 or 125 were waiting for their opportunity. So, it's progression, and now the women are coming in, and now they're bringing multiple weight classes in the women. So it just takes time for divisions to develop. And I knew eventually, if you're going to be fighting the best in the world, it has to be in the UFC. And, I knew that weight class would eventually get there. So I just had to wait my opportunity, and it eventually came.
Yeah, it seems like the sport is evolving every year. I mean, like, there's heaps to talk about, obviously, the Reebok deal, the weight classes. But back when you started in 2002, it was a different time. I'm curious, what was it that drew you into MMA as a career?
Pardon me, what was my...
Well, like, what drew you into MMA as a career?
Oh, I definitely found my passion when I was 13 years old. My high school gym class went for an orientation class, and at a local martial arts studio, and then I signed up that night, and within 2 weeks I was competing. So I definitely found what was my passion in life, and it was in martial arts, and I never looked back from that day. I never took a day off training, and I just really started competing in kickboxing and grappling and mixed martial arts until I could fight pro at 18. So I never strayed from that goal of being a fighter, and that's what drove me every day.
Exactly, Mark. And you've got a bit of a background in a lot of the traditional martial arts. You were a karate champion, I believe, at one point, weren't you?
Yeah, like I basically competed in most martial arts coming up. Like competing in jiu-jitsu tournaments, in like point karate tournaments, in pancration. That was when my introduction into, I guess, a watered down for a form of mixed martial arts because it was you could do everything. You could strike, you could grapple, you could wrestle. There's just no strikes to the face. So it was definitely a good introduction. So I was competing even at 14 years old in mixed martial arts.
Now, even though you were not in the UFC for a number of years after UFC 58, you were busy making a big name for yourself, obviously in WEC and other promotions. It was interesting because when you did finally come back in the UFC, you fought for the title pretty quickly. What was it like being back in the UFC? And, tell us about that big win over George Roop that led to that fight against Jose Aldo.
Well, there's something special to say being a part of a UFC card, and it was obviously great to. It was a pretty cool experience to fight on the Affliction card with Fedor, and all the WC cards. There's something memorable, but I mean, there's something different. There's a different atmosphere when you're involved in a UFC show, and that's where every fighter wants to be. You can people can say that they want to fight all over the world or whatnot, but I mean, the big stage and where you want to compete is in the UFC, and there's something to be said about being on a card like that. The fight with George Roop was tough to take that fight because George and I had trained together for 3 years at that point, but I knew that was a fight that was going to lead me to a title shot, so we had to put our friendship aside and settle it in the ring. I was pretty confident going into that fight, but I definitely wanted to make a statement because if you're going to go in and challenge the belt, you want to have the champion concerned about what you bring to the table. And if I'd have went out there and snuck out a 3-round decision, it's not as powerful statement as going out there and knocking a guy out in a minute. And that's what I did in that fight, and that's what I intended to do, is to go and make a statement.
And you mentioned Affliction there. They're a company that's almost like a bit of a myth because they had so few shows. They were there, they made a big statement, and then all of a sudden they were gone. And obviously you went to the UFC right afterwards. What was the difference like being in Affliction versus the UFC? Like, what was the backstage like? What was the sort of, feeling of being in Affliction like?
Well, there's definitely you knew you're a part of something special. All the fighters they had. That was at the time when Fedor was at his highest. There was the myth and the mystique about him, and I'd be first to say that he did have that. Like when he walked in the room, there's just something about him that you were drawn to, and you questioned it or whatever it was. And then when he came out, I just remember the walk when he walked to the cage because I had already fought and I was in the crowd at that point, and it was almost like everyone just went silent. Like when he walked past you, he's intimidating in his own way.
Yeah, when people talk about superheroes and compare them to MMA fighters, I definitely think Fedor would be the Batman of MMA. A lot of enigma and mystique around the guy. Now, Mark, going back to 2011, like Casper said, you find yourself in the UFC. You have one tough fight before you get a title shot against Jose Aldo. What did you think about Jose before you fought, and what were your thoughts about him before you matched up with him? Did you think that this guy is pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world? Did you think that you had a good chance of beating him?
I knew he was up there for pound, but I think my style was going to present problems with him because the guy, if you go in with one game plan to just take him down and grind him out, it's not going to happen. He's got too many tools, and you have to be willing and able to kind of go through hell to get into those later rounds and go and get into a war with him because he's so explosive where it's not going to end quick, like on your end. Like you have to drag him into the deep waters. And I knew my striking was good enough to compete with him because that's where he does a lot of his damages in his leg kicks and in the striking. And just with my kickboxing background, I knew that I could hang with him, and I knew my conditioning and my speed would be able to get him into deep waters where I did. And, I felt I had the opportunity to put him away at the end, but, that it wasn't in the cards that night. But it was pretty amazing to say, went 5 rounds with one of the best.
Absolutely. I mean, the fight was an absolute classic. I mean, there's so many iconic moments. There's you had that huge hematoma on your head. What was going through your mind during those moments in the fight where it looked like you may get him, and especially, it was right towards the end of the fight?
Yeah, I felt in the last round it was one of those things where you're fighting against the clock. I remember looking up and it almost like the clock was going faster than it should have been. I was chasing after time. But that's just the way it is. Like I had 5 rounds to put him away and I ran out of time to do it in the end. But it was something special, but just because for that fight, it was 15 years in the making for me of training, competing, and then finally getting to fight. And it was the biggest UFC of all time. 55,000 people, and the show was an hour away from my hometown in the first show in Ontario. So there's a lot of first, and just to be a part of that card, let alone, come home with the fight of the night and people having, the memorable fight that it was. It was something that, I always cherished in my career, and that was definitely like the pinnacle of it.
Jose's fought a lot of people since, and he was being pretty dominant against most of them. Some close fights, but there haven't really been those moments lately like he had with him where it kind of looked like the other person might win. Do you think people are approaching him the wrong way? Do you think they're trying to grind it out and not really trying to finish Jose? Do you think that they need to approach the fight with Jose in a different way like you did?
Yeah, I think you have to get in his face. I don't think there's any. You can't let him dictate the pace or how the fight's going, and that's what Jose's good at, is dragging you into the fight that he wants and putting at the pace. Where I felt I put a lot of pressure on him, and it wasn't like I was just diving for a takedown. I was putting pressure and striking at him, and just keeping that constant, attrition on him. And I think that's what you have to do, is you have to be willing to go through that battle to get him into the late rounds. But he's just so explosive where he can finish it in the blink of an eye. And I think that's what we've seen, like in the Chad Mendes fight. You could have the momentum, and then with one strike, one knee, one kick, he can change the momentum right there, because he can do so much damage in one shot.
And it wasn't too long afterwards that you decided to retire. I believe it was around December 2012. Just going back there, how difficult was it for you to retire? And, what were the main sort of things going through your head and the main, reasons why you decided to retire?
I think the main reason why it wasn't that hard of a decision, which told me that it was the right one, where I didn't have to go back and forth. I knew it was my time, because at that point I had competed professionally since 2002. So it was over a decade of competing. I'd fought for the world title, and I felt I put on the best performance. And I like all those years to that moment. And then after that fight, I had 3 losses against guys, in my opinion, I should beat in the first round. And there's a lot of things that happened. Like 2 weeks after I fought for the belt, I had my first daughter. And then 2 months after that, I lost my coach from my whole career, Sean Tompkins. Yeah. And then I had another daughter, and life was changing, and I thought, I was happy with what I'd done in my career, and I'm focused and I have the energy and then desire to carry on the next part of my career, which is coaching, which is running the gym. I'm still going to be involved in the sport, but I felt that it was the time to take a different role.
Now, a lot of fighters have long-lasting injuries after retirement, like Bas Rutten, for example, that comes to mind. We're just wondering, how's your body feeling, and how do you feel physically, since retirement? Do you feel fine, or are there any lingering injuries from MMA?
I definitely have a lot of injuries, like chronic stuff with my shoulders, but I feel, in general, I'm a little healthier now, because I'm not, training twice a day with sparring and whatnot. Like, I still train every day, but it's different. Like, I'm not sparring 2-3 times a week, and I'm healthier in that way. But yeah, like, I didn't retire because my body was giving out or anything like that. I just felt that, I could compete, but again, I was competing at a level that I expect more of myself, because I think there's other demands, with a family and just focus on that. So I didn't have the same mindset as what I had when I was competing. And again, I'm not just competing to get in there and fight. I'm getting in there to be the world champion and to beat the best in the world. And like I said, I've lost to 3 guys that I feel that I should beat in the first round. So I think that was a big indicator that it was my time to walk away.
And I think it happens to a lot of guys. You feel like, one day they're the best, or one day they're on top, and the next, they lose certain fights, and sometimes guys, hang around for years and years. Do you feel like MMA is one of those sports where it's very hard to have a happy ending, and a lot of guys usually don't go out on their own terms?
No question. I think in any sport, because you're driven by your passion and your will to fight, and like I said, I've had plenty of times in my career where I've had ups and downs. Like, that's just the nature of the sport, where you've had losses and you have to kind of climb back and get back on the horse and get back on the winning track. So I had a lot of those. Like I had a couple losses in WC, and then I had to kind of redefine myself, and I came back and then won 3 years straight. Like, I didn't have a loss within 3 years, and then I fought Aldo for the belt. So there's always those things in your career, and it is hard to walk away, because if you're winning and you're at the top of the sport, there's no reason to walk away. And yeah, it's a tough decision, but again, like, I don't feel I'm walking away from the sport, just from the, the competition end of it.
Now, Mark, it seems like you've had a very successful retirement. Like you mentioned, you've got the wonderful family, you've got the great gym, you're still a part of the sport. But retirement in general from MMA, do you think it's difficult for a lot of these athletes? Do you think there needs to be something like a pension fund? Because a lot of them don't have the same thing that you do. A lot of them don't have a great family or a business to sort of bounce back down on once they're retired. Do you think that's an issue in MMA?
It is. Like, I mean, it is a new sport, though. That's the thing. Like, realistically, it's been in the mainstream since, since the 2000s. Like, the first UFC was '93, but again, that was a different sport, different landscape. Where, like, when, I guess, the after the Ultimate Fighter, you're looking at like 2005. So that's really when the sport is taken off. So that you think how old the other sport, like hockey or baseball or soccer or whatever the other sport, how long they've been around and how much guidance they've had and they've learned through experience. And I think we're going to look back in 10 years and we're going to learn from what, how we went through and how we dealt with it. But a pension thing, it's hard to, it's a lot more difficult situation to manage than you think, right? If you look at other sports like boxing, like where it's an individual sport, there's no pension in that as well. So I think the athletes just have to be surrounded by good mentors, good management. So I think it's a lot on you to take ownership of it.
Now, Mark, we're literally a few days away now from it being, I believe, officially 2 years since you retired in 2012. I'm just curious, do you at all feel the itch to come back at any point in time?
You know what? Like, I'm still trained. Like, there's obviously some days, like, when I'm in there sparring with guys and, I feel as ready as ever. But, like I said, I would never be one of those guys who's half in the pool or half out. Like, I'm either in or out. And, I'm kind of like a 100% type person where it's 100% in or 100% out. So, like, definitely I love training. I love being a part of the sport. But, I'm happy with what I've done in my fighting career. And now, like, I'm focused on the next phase.
The featherweight division in the UFC, it's funny, back when you fought at UFC 58, it was non-existent. Now it's one of the hottest divisions out of all the divisions in the UFC. What's your thoughts on the landscape of the featherweight division now, compared to even, back when you were fighting in the featherweight division? What do you think about some of these, young athletes that are making a name for himself in the division?
Well, I think Conor McGregor has completely flipped the division upside down, and that's exactly what it needed. Like you can see the pay-per-view numbers, the draw, it's not the same for the 125, the 135, and the 145 division. So you need someone with that it factor that brings eyes and butts to the seat. And that's what Conor's doing. And I think if he was in another division, that division would get that same spike. So I think that's why everyone's talking about it. And with that being said, I think it helps gather the respect that Aldo deserves, because a lot of, same with like Mighty Mouse. Like I think he's one of the best pound for pound fighters, and no one even gives him the respect because there's no attention for it. And what Conor's done for the 145 division not only obviously brings attention to him, but it also brings attention to Jose Aldo, the champion, and to see what how long his winning streak is and how good he is. So I think it's good for the whole division, not just Conor.
Absolutely. And do you think that maybe, say, the flyweight division would benefit from another, say, a flyweight like Conor McGregor?
They need it. Like, I mean, it's like anything. Like, it doesn't matter what division it is. Like, like just like boxing. Like, it's Floyd Mayweather or Manny Pacquiao. It's because of that person that the attention's on that division. It's because it's that long ago, like for boxing, like the heavyweight, you just went for the heavyweight or tight, whoever it was. But now it's a guy, and you need that person that brings attention to a division. In any division would gather more interest about having a guy like that.
Conor McGregor, he gets a lot of flack. People always say, "Oh, the UFC matchup with guys that he could beat." What are your thoughts on the kid as a fighter? Do you think he'd have a shot against a guy like a Jose Aldo? Let's say he gets matched up with him later on this year. Do you think he could beat a guy like him?
On paper, you can't say that. There's no way you can say that he can hang with Jose Aldo. He's never fought anybody in the top 10. So, I mean, there's no. I guess with Dustin Poirier's in the top 10, but. He's had one fight against a guy in the top 10. So to say that he's ready to take a shot at that title on paper, no. But for the attention that he's gathered for the division, I think he's earned it. And I think that's what you have to do. And like I said, with like when I fought Roop, you have to go out and make statements, whether it's with your fight or whether it's with your mouth. But people want to see him fight. So I think he deserves the respect to take that shot. I know there's guys in line, like Frankie Edgar deserves that shot more than anybody. But, Connor's definitely got the attention that people are interested in that fight.
And I'm not sure how much MMA you watch nowadays and how many UFC shows, but I'm just curious, if you do you ever find yourself watching the featherweight division and the fights and sort of sizing the guys up or breaking them down in terms of like skill levels?
I'm a fan of the sport, and it doesn't really matter what division. But I thought that Frankie Edgar fight was something else. I was always a fan, but I'm a massive fan. That was something else. It was pretty incredible. The tenacity he has, and I think every young fighter should look at a guy like Frankie Edgar and pick him as their role model.
Now, the big thing that got announced by the UFC is their partnership with Reebok. You're a gym owner now, and there's a lot of, up-and-coming fighters coming out of your gym. What do you think about this move that the UFC made? Do you think it's good that fighters are going to have the uniforms and lose the individual sponsorships?
I think there's a sport. I think the sport's going to benefit because, just like if the UFC is trying to make it, to be accepted like NFL or Major League Baseball or the NHL or professional hockey, I think having that uniform look, creates, consistency within the brand. So I think it's good in that end. Obviously, if someone had a great sponsor that was always loyal and backing them, it's gonna hurt them in that way. And also the managers, like I was lucky enough to have a great manager in Robert Rivetta. And I gave him a call because I think, the first and foremost, the people are going to get hurt is the managers first off. But I know a couple fighters in our gym that fight with the UFC, and they were thrilled to hear about the partnership, and they're looking forward to it. So I like time will tell, and I hope, the fighters at the end of the day benefit from it.
I think the biggest sort of aim for the UFC to try and get this, I mean, there's a lot of goals here, but one of them they're saying is to sort of eliminate the need to go out and search and grab those sponsors. Can you tell us a little bit about what the process was like for getting a sponsor, and did you have any of those bad experiences that people often talk about?
I think in my early days, because the sport was evolving, and you learn too the real people were in the sport. But I think that, like I said, surrounding yourself with a good manager and good mentorship is what you need. And the last thing I think a pro fighter should be worrying about is him having to knock down doors and ask for someone to sponsor them. That's a manager's job, and I think the fighters have to take that seriously and make sure that they make a partnership, with their manager and that's the way it should be. It should be a two-way street, and the fighter's focus should be training and stepping in the cage and performing.
Really good analysis there, Mark. Now, we let the fans know you're coming on the show. We've got a few fan questions for you. First one's from Raging Rick. Raging Rick would like to know your thoughts on training. He goes, fighters getting injured is a big part of the sport these days. How have you modified the training in your gym to make sure, your fighters aren't getting as injured, and is sparring as much of a part of training as it was back when you first started?
Yeah, that's a good question. And like I said, this is a relatively new sport when you break down the years that we've been competing at this level. So yeah, exactly. You learn as the years go by. You learn from other camps. You learn from other coaches. And I think that's one thing is having a good coaching staff that monitors the training and sets guidelines and sets the precedent of what a training camp is, what you do on each day. And the second question with the sparring, I definitely I remember when I was starting in like 2002, I'd be sparring 4 times a week, and obviously that's not good. That's way too much. Injuries happen. I think we're down in our camp. We're 1 to 2 days a week sparring now. When the guys normally spar on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and a lot of times the guys will either pick one or the other, so it's down to even 1 week of hard sparring. I think you have to be fight ready, so the conditioning training is definitely I think the biggest part. But sparring is a massive part of your training, but I think it's not as often as when I started.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of gym owners and coaches are going towards that sort of route. Now, I've got a question for MMA Mark. MMA Mark wants to know, you were one of the best strikers in the featherweight division. He wants to know, how would you have matched up against Conor McGregor?
I think my speed. I think he blitzes guys with his speed, and I think I'm faster than him. But yeah, like I'm not. I mean, I'm in no spot to be Conor. making shots at guys when I can't come back and
Sure.
back it up by fighting. But I think I match up really well with him. But I think he's got a really unique style. I think he's fearless. I think it'd make for an exciting fight. But I think one thing that I would give him problems with is my speed.
Now, Mark, we've got a segment here we like to call the Submission Radio Tap Out Round. It's a fun round where we give you some fun questions and you answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
You bet.
What's Christmas look like in the Hominick household?
Lots of Christmas trees. I think we have 3 Christmas trees. I have 2 little girls, so lots of decorations.
Now, we noticed you were selected for the great honor of jury duty. We have to ask, what was it like, and how many times did you inappropriately yell, "I object"?
Yeah, I think luckily I didn't get picked. I got some tips from other people to not get selected.
You'll have to tell us after the show.
What's your favorite fight outside the UFC that listeners that are listening right now may not have seen and need to YouTube immediately?
Well, we have a top 125 pounder in our gym, Malcolm Gordon. He was ranked number 1 in Canada at the flyweight division. He's a finisher. He had all his wins by finish.
Sorry, Mark. And I also meant, what's one of your fights outside the UFC that the listeners can watch on YouTube immediately that's been outside the UFC? So when you fought for like the WEC or one of the other promotions? One of your favorites.
I think the Yves Jabouin fight, myself versus Yves Jabouin at WC 49. I think in that year it was voted round of the year. I think we had over like 400 strikes in 2 rounds, so it was a war.
Awesome. Now, in the early days coming up in the sport, did you ever have any strange experiences or moments where you were like, yeah, this is definitely the minor leagues?
Oh, I've fought in some smoky bars in Iowa and Indiana, and yeah, definitely, looking around, making sure that we got out of there safe after we got our wins.
Yeah.
Who was your idol in MMA, Mark?
I really, coming up as a fighter, I really liked Vanderlei Silva. I just liked his tenacity, his aggression, and my first fight in 2002, I wore his fighting shorts and kind of to pay respect to him.
Now, during day-to-day activities, do you still whip out the push-ups when you beat somebody?
Yeah, I'm always in the gym, and I'm a competitive person, so that's part of my repertoire.
So, for example, you take a car spot away from someone, you're getting out of that car and you're doing those push-ups, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Now, is there anybody that can beat Jose Aldo, in your opinion?
I think Frankie. I mean, he's already beat Frankie, but I think that last fight was something special. The performance he put on, and I'd love to see that fight.
Now, you mentioned the Yves Jabouin fight, but I'm wondering if there's any others. What was your favorite fight of your entire career?
I don't know if it's the favorite fight, but like one that still gets me riled up is a Hatsu Hioki. We fought twice. In our last fight, we went 5 rounds. It was for the TKO title. And I lost a split decision where I thought I won, but he's one of those guys, I'd fight him in my backyard if I had another opportunity.
Damn it, Hatsu. And finally, what's one thing that you want people to remember about you when they look back on your career, which is, very, very impressive?
I think just the way I approached it. Like I took everything serious, and I was as serious inside the cage as outside the cage, and I think that's what athletes need to do.
Guys, don't forget to follow Mark on Twitter, obviously, at Mark Hominick. And, of course, check out his website, markhominick.com. And, of course, check out your gym. Mark, where can people find your gym?
www.adrenalinemmA.ca. So it's Adrenaline Training Center. So that's our gym.
Awesome.
And it's one of the best ones around, guys. So if you're traveling down to Canada, no brainer, get down there and see if you can out push up Mark. We've had my cousin's from Sydney, so he's been down at the gym as well. So we've brought your country here.
Oh, very nice. Well, Mark, we just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a great pleasure. You're welcome anytime. And thank you so much for taking the time.
Hey, both ways. Great talking to you guys.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Weidman, and you're listening to Submission Radio. They're fucking rad.
Our next guest on Submission Radio is fighting Lyoto Machida at UFC Fight Night 58, Brazil, December 20th. Ladies and gentlemen, CB Dollaway is on Submission Radio. CB, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. How you doing?
Yeah, we're doing really well. It's a pleasure to have you on. Now, first question, CB. We were looking over your Twitter feed recently, and we saw a fair few tweets in regards to driving and road rage and indicators. Our biggest question is, have people on the roads been annoying you recently? And if so, what are their names so that we can eliminate them from your life for a small fee?
No, actually, yeah, I had some guy, it was weird, some guy in front of me the other day just slows down to we're on a one-lane road, just slows down to 10 miles an hour, pulls off to where I can't quite get around him. I'm stopped. I'm like, what's he doing, whatever. And then when I go around him, flies up on my bumper and starts putting his bright lights on.
Oh, man.
It's like, oh, man, I wish it was legal to get out and take care of him. But, yeah, I don't know what the guy was trying to do, but it's like he's trying to start something with someone. And, obviously if I got out and did that, it would be me who, gets the short end of the stick from the law.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, there was extra energy in the sparring session that day. Now, obviously, you got a big fight coming up December 20th at UFC Fight Night against Lyoto Machida. What did you think when you first heard that you're fighting a guy like Machida next? What was your reaction to the call when you got the fight?
I was actually pretty excited. I've been wanting a main event fight, a big high-profile fight, and get in there and test myself against one of the best guys in the world. And as far as that goes, he's one of the, the best guys in the sport right now. He, is former world champion, defended his belt once at light heavyweight. So, to get in there, and he just fought for the world title, So this is the kind of guy I think, when I get a victory over him, it gives me an argument for a world title fight.
That's exactly right. You summed it up perfectly. I guess the big question is, CB, what do you think is your biggest weapon against Lyoto Machida?
Obviously, my wrestling. Obviously, we looked at, if you look at the Chris Weidman fight, it did give him a lot of trouble when Chris was able to take him down, get on top. Also, my boxing is getting pretty good. I've been spending a lot of time with my boxing coach, and, I feel confident, if I catch Lyoto with a punch, I can put him to sleep. My punching power is there in both hands, and, obviously he's not easy to hit, but, we've been working on a lot of things, a lot of good head movement to get out of the way and avoid his counter strikes and land some strikes of our own. And really the key is to be able to just mix everything up. Obviously I have a game plan, but I got to get out there and be a mixed martial artist. I got to have him thinking takedown, or am I going to punch? Am I going to kick? Am I going to try to submit him? Just wherever the fight goes, I've got to be a mixed martial artist and apply everything. I can't go out with a, one-track mind of I'm just going to wrestle Lyoto or I'm just going to stand up with him, because that's not going to work. He's too high level of a guy. So, I've really got to put everything together.
Absolutely, CB. He's a high-level guy, but you yourself, you've been in the UFC for such a long time, and you've been kicking ass for a really, really long time. Now, a lot of UFC fans are overlooking you going into this fight. Not many are giving you a very high chance against Lyoto. What's your feeling being like about that? Is that something that fuels you in the training going into this fight?
Oh, yeah. That's been the story of my last 4 fights. The Tim Boach fight, no one gave me a shot. I think I got robbed, and so do a lot of other people. Obviously I lost a split decision, but whatever. And everyone said, I wouldn't last with him. Then I fought, who did I fight? Cesar Ferreira after that. Everyone, I don't have a chance there. I knocked him out in 39 seconds. And then going into the Francis Carmont fight, he doesn't have a chance there. Carmont's, he's going to wrestle him, do all I was able to come out on top of that. So I've been the underdog in all my last fights, and I kind of like that role. And it does fuel me to go in there and, try to prove everyone wrong. And the way I see it, I have nothing to lose. I'm a guy going out with everything to gain. And, this is my shot.
Absolutely. And of course, the fight's in Brazil. You are actually undefeated in Brazil. You've got a 2-0 record in there. I'm just curious, there's been some questionable decisions and stoppages in Brazil. How do you feel about fighting in Brazil in general? And have you ever been worried in the past about, any refereeing or judging going into a fight in Brazil?
I don't know. I mean, if you watched my Tim Boetsch fight that happened in the States, that was pretty much a highway robbery. And then in Brazil, I was able to get a decision victory over Daniel Serafian in a very close fight, which I think was a closer fight than the Tim Boetsch fight. So no worries about going to Brazil. I believe they're fair and whatever, It's if you leave it in the hands of the judges, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get someone else's opinion. It may not be how you thought the fight went, but it doesn't matter. So, you really gives me that motivation to go out and try to finish the fight.
Your friend and Power MMA fitness training partner, Ryan Bader, he had a tough loss against Machida, where it seemed like Machida baited him into overcommitting. Did Ryan give you any advice for this fight against Lyoto? And have you guys been training together? Obviously, you probably have for this fight.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Ryan's not a southpaw, but we've been doing some training. I've gotten some insight from him, and I believe we've both grown so much since then. I've been with a different trainer since then, and so has he for almost 3 years. We're just different fighters than we were when Ryan fought him. I feel like I have a much better understanding of the sport and the stand-up in particular. I have a better understanding of what Lyoto is trying to do and how to negate it. 3 years ago, this fight, it probably wouldn't have been a good fight for me, where now, like I said, I just have a better understanding of what I'm trying to do, how I'm going to try to do it, and it makes me feel more comfortable about going into the fight.
And Lyoto has this style where he stays out of range and he circles and moves in and out, causing his opponents to often get frustrated and overcommit. How prepared are you if the fight begins to play out like that?
Very prepared. That's one of the things. It's a 5-round fight. I have all the time in the world, really. I've never been in a 5-round fight, but I know 3-round fights, you have plenty of time there. So in a 5-round fight, you need to be extra patient. If he's going to run like that, I've got to, take my own time. It may be a little boring in the early going, but, I've noticed in those fights, in the later rounds, he starts to stand in front of people more. He starts to slow down. He isn't as agile. So, you've got to be patient and know that your time will come when he will stand there and fight with you. The running will stop. So just don't get too over committed in the early going, and eventually he'll be there to fight you.
Sorry to cut in, Dennis. That's an interesting analysis on it, CB. Without giving away your game plan, is it possible that you be looking for that late finish later in the rounds?
Yeah, I'll be looking for the finish early, late, whenever, if it presents itself. But, you gotta fight to how he's going to fight. You've got to understand if he's going to run, that's not the time to try to attack him. You've got to be patient and pick your spots and know that the time will come. But you never know. He may come after me early. I doubt it, but if he does, I'll be ready for that too. But he's got to be ready to adjust to whatever he's going to do and know what you're going to do to take care of whatever he offers.
Absolutely, CB. Now, you were at the Time Is Now press conference, sitting with a lot of the champions, a lot of the guys like Chris Weidman, the big names like Conor McGregor, and sitting next to guys like the guy that you're going to fight, Machida. Tell us what went through your mind, because if you do stop Machida like you're planning on doing, you will be propelled into that class of Chris Weidmans and, the upper echelon where fans will absolutely know you are the best. Did it cross your mind that, I'm that close to, being one of these, top guys sitting up here on the pedestal after all these years of fighting in the UFC?
Oh, of course, it's sitting in there, you start looking around the room, people you're sitting there with, and it's kind of a good feeling. All your hard work's finally paying off. Everything's starting to come together. I had, a tough time there, was dealing with injuries and whatnot. And, we kind of left our old gym, started our whole new gym, a whole new camp, and just, we had a lot of things going on. And now we're starting to see kind of some of the fruits of that labor come together. Everyone out of power is doing really good. We got, almost 25 professionals there, over 1,000 members at our gym.
Wow.
Guys are doing good. We got more guys they're right on the cusp of going into the UFC. We've built something really great. And, it just, in the process of doing that, there was a lot of hard work, some distractions and whatnot. And now everything's on the right track. We're in a good spot, and everyone's doing well. And, it just gives you a high level of confidence, knowing who you train with and seeing other guys being successful. So it's a really good feeling, and, I just want to continue it.
And CB, with a win over Lyoto Machida, where do you think that puts you? I think I've heard you say that you want a shot against Chris. I think the UFC say you might get Luke Rockhold. Where do you think it puts you in the division?
I think I deserve a title shot. It'd be, I keep going back to the Tim Boetsch fight where a lot of people know I won that fight. So if that didn't happen with the split decision bull crap, this would be the third victory over a top 10 opponent. Some good finishes there and some good fights. People they're seeing I'm an exciting fighter. So yeah, I think people would like to see me get in there and mix it up with whoever comes out on top in February.
A big fight in the middle.
Earned it.
Oh, absolutely, CB. Another big fight in the middleweight division happened in Australia with Luke Rockhold fighting Michael Bisping. Just wondering, did you watch that fight, and what do you think of Luke Rockhold? Obviously, he's making a case for a title shot soon as well, so it will be you against him, sort of going for that title shot. What do you think about Luke, and how do you think he matched up with a guy like that?
Well, I've trained with Luke. He's very tough, very skilled. And yeah, he's got a great case too, but yeah, if he did get the title shot, I'd be willing to wait and improve my own skills, and take the winner. I just feel that, my next fight, I want a title fight. I don't want a title eliminator. I don't want another main event. I want to go for that title. I'm not getting any younger. I'm 31 years old this year. Yeah, I've suffered injuries and stuff. I know that every fight you risk getting injured, so I don't want any more in-betweens. I want that title fight. I want to get this victory over Lyoto, and I want my next fight to be a title fight. I don't want to take one in between and blow an ACL out or something. I just know how hard it is to come back from injuries, and like I said, I'm not getting any younger. I've wrestled since I was 5 years old. My body, it's getting wore out, so I don't know how many more years I have in the sport, so if the opportunity is there, I know what I want.
Yeah, and it makes sense, and you're definitely making a good case for it. Let's say everything goes perfect according to plan. You get a big win over Lyoto, and you get that title shot against Chris Weidman. How do you see yourself stacking up against Chris?
Well, it's pretty cut and dry. We're both great wrestlers, which usually negates the wrestling part. I know, he's very good on the ground. I'm pretty skilled myself, but I could see it turning into a pretty good stand-up war and being an exciting fight for the fans, and definitely feel like I could come out on top. Like I said, I would take that extra time to improve my skills. I know him and Vitor have a fight in February, and if someone else got the next shot before me, like I said, I'd be willing to wait and improve my skills and just kind of dial everything in. I've been pretty busy as of lately, so a nice little break is always welcome. And yeah, I think I could put on an exciting fight for the fans and just be good for everybody.
Exactly, just what the doctor ordered. Now, Lyoto is a very respectful guy, but in his own respectful way, he basically, has said a number of times that he believes he'll finish you within the 5 rounds. Do you think that he might be overlooking you a little bit going into this fight?
I don't know. I don't really care, what his mindset is. I know what mine is. And I know too, and I believe I can. So, I understand what he's saying. He's a champion himself. He's very confident in himself. And if he didn't think that, I'd almost wonder what was wrong with him. So, if he's not thinking, that way, then probably shouldn't be getting in there. Like I said, I believe I can finish him, and I'll definitely be trying, and I know he'll be doing the same, and it'll make for a great, great fight for the fans.
Now, CB, speaking of confidence, you've always been a confident guy and a confident fighter in the octagon, but it seems like you've been a bit more outspoken lately. Are we going to see a sort of more talking from you if you do win this fight? Are you looking to speak out a bit more? Because you've always been a bit more, a bit more reserved after your victories. Are we going to see you, taking the mic and sort of cutting a bit of a promo if you do win this one?
Yeah, I mean, that's just something I've learned you have to be, closed mouths don't get fed, as the saying goes. And that's just part of the job, coming up in the sport. I didn't realize, that is a part of it. Just fighting is one part, and you've got to learn to promote yourself. You've got to brand yourself. There's a lot more to fighting than just fighting, and that's something I'm learning, and, I'm just growing as, I'm kind of coming into my own, and it's just, something you got to do. It's another part of the job. I've not really been one to want to be real outspoken, but if that's what it takes, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, sure. Now, CB, we're going to do something fun with you. It's called the Submission Radio Tap-Out Round, where we ask you a bunch of fun questions and you rattle them off. You tell us the first thing that comes to your mind. Just before we do that and sort of wrap it up, I just wanted to get your thoughts on these new uniforms that have come out. What do you know so far? What are your initial thoughts and reactions?
I'm pretty excited, knowing that we're going to have a sponsor. It's like a giant corporate sponsor like Reebok. I think it's going to be really good for the sport. Outside of that, I don't really know the full details on it, how it's going to trickle down to the fighters and whatnot. I think it's going in the right direction, though. If there can be more big sponsors like that coming into the sport, it is going to mean more money for the fighters. I just don't know how long until that happens. Until numbers are announced, no one's going to know. So I don't want to make any prejudgments. I've always been happy with my manager and what he's done for me, and I hope, the uniforms and all that, I hope it still stacks up to what I've gotten in the past. I hope it doesn't take money out of me and my family's pockets. And until the numbers come out, no one can really say one way or the other.
Absolutely. Now, we'll jump to the tap-out round. First question that we're going to rattle off for you, CB, is do you still keep in touch with any of your Ultimate Fighter 7 castmates?
Not really. I see them here and there. Like I was just on a tour with Matt Brown, and we did the USO, or not the USO tour, but the Armed Forces Entertainment tour, where we went all through Iraq and Afghanistan. And he was on the tour, so it was good to see him, but as far as on a day-to-day level, I don't really keep in touch with anyone.
Now, CB, we haven't seen you added as a DLC to EA Sports UFC just yet. Can we expect that to happen anytime soon?
I have no idea. That's not. I don't have any control over that.
We want
EA Sports would like to add me. I know a lot of people would like to prove me a necktie.
Yeah.
To be part of the game. So hopefully they throw me in there one of these days. I don't know what I got to do.
Come on, EA. Let's do it. Now, CB, finish this sentence. People don't know that I'm
an awesome chess player.
Yeah.
Wow, always a few moves ahead, CB. Now, tell us about the enjoyable experience you had with Ryan Bader when you guys got stuck on a plane over to Australia that one time.
Oh, well, it wasn't a very awesome experience. We got on the plane. There was a gentleman to our I believe our left, who been traveling for quite some time, almost 20 some hours or something, and we could definitely smell him for about the next 12 hours to Australia. He had some kicking BO.
Jesus.
But luckily for me, it was just out of smell for me, but Ryan was right in it.
It's like in Wedding Crashers when it's like we lost a lot of good men. Ryan was one of those men on that plane trip.
Yeah, well, it's like vegetable lasagna in Seinfeld when you try to keep getting out and going to the toilet.
Now we've got another question for the tap out round. This one is from one of the fans. His name is Hans Jerkmiov. I think he's Russian. His question is why haven't you ever considered changing your name from the Doberman to Dollar Bills?
Dollar Bills. Guess because I got to start making those big money, getting those big money fights. Got to become champion, and maybe I'll be able to do that.
That's it.
Okay, well, we're going to take your word for it. Now, tell us this, CB. When you're not training, you obviously mentioned you're a very busy guy. What do you do to take your mind off fighting apart from playing chess?
A lot of times you can find me out in the deserts of Arizona off-roading. I own a Ford Raptor truck. It's kind of my hobby, off-roading. I'll pack up some guns, camping supplies, go out, screw around shooting guns. I have off-road toys, razors and stuff like that, and go out and ride those and just kind of hang out, be outdoors. Yeah, so another thing I like doing, pheasant hunting. I'll go up to South Dakota, do pheasant hunting up there, shoot sporting clays. So just kind of anything outdoors and kind of get away from technology a little bit, get off the phone, get off the computers, and just go and actually live life.
Yeah, I've never done like any off-roading or anything like that, but I'm super jealous of people that do get to do that because it looks awesome. Now,
if you're ever here in Arizona, man, look me up. I'll take you.
Oh, absolutely. That'd be sick. Now, prediction time, CB. Anderson Silva versus Nick Diaz. Who do you think's going over in that one?
I don't know. I don't know. I think Nick is the underdog in that one, and like I said, I like being the underdog and always root for the underdog, so I'm going to go with Nick Diaz.
Now, this one has a lot to do with you. Weidman and Belfort are going to fight. Who do you think is going to walk out on top of that? Because you might very well be challenging the winner of that for the title.
I can see Chris coming out on top of it. I feel like Chris is the more well-rounded fighter. Vitor, is obviously devastating with his striking. But I just feel like Chris is the more well-rounded, and the longer the fight goes, the more it's going to play into Chris's game. Chris, his conditioning is great. So, I think that's where Vitor's kind of struggled in the past, is with his conditioning a little bit. So if Chris, can get out of the first couple of rounds, get some takedowns, wear him down, I think, that fight goes Chris's way.
And finally, the most important prediction of all, CB, what's the official prediction? How are you beating Lyoto Machida at Fight Night 58 Brazil on, I believe it's December 20th?
Hopefully with a first round knockout. Go out there and take care of business early.
Absolutely. I think that'd be awesome, and that would definitely silence a lot of the Brazilian fans in that arena. Can't wait to watch, guys. December 20th, Ultimate Fight Night Brazil, Ultimate Fight Night 58 Brazil, CB Dollaway versus Lyoto Machida, and of course, don't forget to check out CB on Twitter at CB Dollaway. CB, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Hopefully we'll be talking to you soon.
Absolutely.
This is Don Fry, and you're listening to Submission Radio. You touch that dial and I'll kill you.
All right, guys, our next guest has been on the show many times. He manages guys such as King Mo, Muhammad Lawal, and of course, Nate Diaz. He's none other than Mike Kogan. Mike, welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you?
Hey, what's up?
Hey, the last time we spoke to you, we spoke a lot about Nate Diaz. A lot has changed since then. Obviously, Nate Diaz will be fighting Rafael dos Anjos at UFC on Fox December 13th. Tell us, how did that fight come together?
Actually, I don't know. Other than Nate asked for a fight against a top contender, and I think dos Anjos was the only one available that wasn't injured or committed, and now he's fighting him.
Fans are pretty excited to see that fight.
But he had that conversation himself. There's actually another party that's helping him deal with the UFC thing. So I don't talk to the UFC.
Do you think that, speaking to Nate, was it the fact that he helped as an assistant coach on The Ultimate Fighter that sort of made him come around a little bit to fighting in the UFC again?
I'm sorry, say it again? So I think what?
Well, Nate was an assistant coach on The Ultimate Fighter for Gil. Was that a factor in him thinking about, working with the company again?
No. He was an assistant coach on The Ultimate Fighter because Gil is his buddy and he asked him to do it.
Okay, so you say that there's another party.
Him coming back.
You say that there's another party helping you with helping Nate with the.
Nate, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, helping Nate with the UFC. So does that mean you're not in contact with the UFC anymore?
No.
Okay, but you're still managing Nate, correct?
I guess in a matter of speaking, yeah. Outside of dealing with the UFC, yeah.
Right. Well, one of the reactions that everybody had was the fact that the UFC, got the big Reebok sponsorship deal recently. What did you think when you found out the news? Obviously, Nate had a negative reaction to it. What did you think, and how does that affect you as a manager?
Well, me personally, this doesn't affect in any way because I don't have anybody in the UFC, so it doesn't do anything for me. Actually, me as a manager, it's great because now all these sponsors that used to pay tax in the UFC and sponsor fighters there are now able to come sponsor people in Bellator, which is where I have my guys.
Okay.
So for me personally, it was great news. I was rejoiced.
A lot of managers have come out and, there's been mixed reactions. I'm just curious. Obviously, it's good for you, doesn't affect you. That's great. Do you know any other ways that it'll affect other managers?
Oh, absolutely. If I had fighters in the UFC, yes, it would affect me tremendously for a number of reasons. It would hit my pocket directly as a manager because now I can't ascertain sponsors for my fighters, which they used to pay percentages to, right? Mm. So now those managers are basically get hit with a reduction in their income or ability to make income. And number two is it would affect my fighters' ability to earn money. But mainly, I think what the managers are really afraid of is that there's an ongoing movement, very subtle and very, kind of under the rug, to get rid of the managers. It's no secret. UFC doesn't like to deal with managers because they feel like they're all retards, and it's much easier to convince a fighter to do something. And sponsorship was one of the largest reasons why a lot of the managers were able to justify their existence, right? Because you take a fighter when he's fresh, young, and you nurture him, and you get him through the amateurs, and you get him into the smaller shows, and build him up. And then it's time for him to sign with the UFC. As a manager, the most you can do is just send his name in, right? And then if they like him, they pick him up, they give him a standard contract. You cannot negotiate anything in your contract. And from there on, they literally just call you and go, "This is the guy you're fighting." And you go, "Okay, thank you. I'll let my guy know." So the role is reduced tremendously for majority of the fighters. I'm not saying every single fighter. Mm. So what the managers were able to do was, get sponsorships, get other side deals for their guys. Well, now they can't do that either. So now the most they can do is get deals for guys outside of the UFC, right? But I know that there's mixed feelings about this because some managers have come out and said, "Oh, if you just work your ass off and work really hard, you'll be able to get whatever." But I walk through stores, sporting goods stores, all kinds of stores. I don't see, a lot of the UFC fighters' pictures posted endorsing anything, or anywhere else in the media. You know what I mean? Like you turn on TV in America, and you see an NFL player doing Papa John's commercial or cell phone company commercial or whatever. NBA players. Hell, I even seen Michael Phelps do stuff. I've never seen a UFC guy outside of Metro PCS promote anything. And Metro PCS is partnered with the UFC. Mm. So that's how they get the guys. So, this whole thing of like, oh, you should just go out there and try. Good luck. There's nothing there. So now you basically reduce the manager down to, I don't know what. So those guys who have good relationships with their fighters, at this point, will just make money just because they want to pay them because they're nice guys. But realistically, what's this guy going to do? There's no sponsorships. You can't negotiate contracts. You just kind of have to take what they give you. And And if you try to speak up, you get called a scumbag and a douchebag. So, I mean, what's there to do? Not much. I'm not saying this applies unilaterally to every single fighter. You know what I mean? Like, Ronda Rousey needs a manager because she's doing a whole lot of stuff outside. But Ronda Rousey's, being represented by William Morris Endeavor, one of the largest talent agencies in the world. You know what I mean? John Jones needs a manager. Cain Velasquez needs a manager. But countless other fighters that are on a roster no longer need managers.
That's a really interesting point. You mentioned that it seems like, eventually, like, what the UFC is sort of trying to do is get rid of those managers. Do you think for some of the smaller guys, it's going to get to the point where they just won't need a manager, and there's a lot of the guys that are managing MMA fighters might not be managers anymore at all, or maybe have to find another career?
On a grander scale, I see that happening. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Let's say you're 8-0 with 8 finishes.
Yep.
And you fought legitimate guys. You're not like fighting some scrubs. You send an email to Joe Silva and you say, hey, my name is blah, blah, blah. I'm in this weight class. I'm 8-0. I'd like to fight in the UFC. He looks at your record. If he feels like he should sign you, he sends you a contract. You can have it read, but that's about it. You can't argue it. You just sign it, send it back. Then you show up, they give you a Reebok uniform, you go fight. What's the manager do?
Right, that's a great point, Mike. Now, from a different perspective, if you could shed some light for us, because I think people are pretty confused. Nate Diaz had a negative reaction to the news. How does this affect the fighters? Obviously, before they could go out and get sponsorships, and some of the guys lower on the card could make some money from that. Does this mean that guys, particularly the guys to the middle and the lower of the card, are likely to make a lot less money now that this deal has come in place?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to affect them negatively, yes. Because you have a lot of guys out there that have had good relationships with their sponsors for years, and their sponsors are giving them monthly payments. Not a lot, but, when you're a guy making 10 and 10 and you fight 3 times a year, you win 2 and you lose 1, you just made $40,000. From that $40,000, you pay your manager, you pay your coaches, you have to buy supplements or whatever. If you have a supplement sponsor, great. But still, I mean, that's not a lot of money. You know what I mean? Like for $40,000 in the U.S. does not get you too far. After you're done paying commissions, it's not that much. So you have a sponsor giving you $1,000, $1,500 a month. Whatever it may be a local, restaurant owner or whatever it may be. It doesn't even have to be, like Affliction or Dethrone. It's just local guys. Now that money is gone, and the Reebok deal, great. They're saying that all the money will go to the athletes. I don't buy that. I don't think all the money will go to the athletes. I think when they say we're not going to make a penny off this deal, that may be a fair statement. But there's no way they're just going to take, let's say, Cage Potato reported that the contract's worth $70 million over 6 years. That's $11 million a year. There's no way they're going to take $11 million a year, divide it all up amongst 550 athletes, and just start writing them checks. Not going to happen. They're going to appear on the ring canvas. There's a cost for that. They might not count it as a profit, but as a cost to it. So they could just say, well, it costs $1 million a year to be on our campus. We're not generating profit off of it. We're just covering the cost of the ring canvas. That's what it would cost for other sponsors to get on, right? By the time it's done, it's going to get stripped down. Top-level guys will get some money. Middle-level guys will get some money. The rest of them will get, free sneakers. That's what I think is going to happen. I don't know what's actually going to happen. Obviously, I don't sit there, but there's just no way that all these people are just going to start walking away with money. You know what I mean? And that's just how it's going to be. You'll see. And then people will just suck it up like they suck up everything else. You know what I mean? It's like, and there's a point to all of this. Many sports leagues have uniforms, and athletes don't get paid to wear them. I mean, Tom Brady doesn't get money from Nike for wearing his jersey to play in the NFL. That's true. And UFC is headed towards, that whole sports league kind of a image. I mean, every time they do something, they go, well, other sports do it. But, NFL also has a collective bargaining agreement and pension funds and medical insurance for their for their athletes. Well, what I'm saying is that there's a lot of comparisons made nowadays to other sports leagues, NBA, NFL, NHL. And uniform is just the next progression, in that. strive to get towards that sports-like model. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that these guys don't get compensated like the sports guys in the other sports models. So to start cutting off their income in the off chance that they might somehow get it some other way, it just hurts them at the end. You know what I mean? There should have been some kind of a smoother transition. Something that allows people to, maintain some of their sponsors for some period of time. Maybe limit it or whatever it may be, and see how it plays out, and just kind of try to balance it out. Because, in the NFL, yes, there's uniforms in the NFL, and the players don't get paid to wear a uniform to a game. But that's just one part of the NFL. Like, every time there's comparison between MMA and other sports, we always compare things like uniforms and all this other stuff. Nobody ever compares things like collective bargaining agreements, pension funds, health insurance, higher pays. An average NFL player makes $500,000. Yeah, they can't live a super lavish lifestyle and drive around in a Ferraris, but after 10 years of playing there, they get a $120,000 pension. And once again, you're not going to live this lavish lifestyle, but for $120,000, you can at least pay your bills to support your family. When an average guy retires from MMA, he has no clue what he's going to do. Most of them go open gyms, and they're unsuccessful because they're just unsuccessful. But we always point to the few that have made good money, or point to the few that have started at gyms that are successful, and we go, well, they did it. Why can't you do it? That's just naive. Just naive to put everybody in the same category. You know what I mean? Because just like in the NFL, there are players that have made hundreds of millions of dollars when they were playing because they were star athletes. But it doesn't mean that the average guy retiring from the NFL is going to be starving to death or living below poverty lines or not knowing how to pay his bills. No, they still have a pension. They can't fit into that lifestyle with the money they get. That's their problem. That's now you just draw a line, but they do have something to fall back on. So, I think if we're going to start comparing things to other sports, we should also compare the back end, not keep that hush quiet and just talk about the uniforms. You know what I mean? And then this whole thing about, you get a percentage of merchandise made with your likeness. Yeah, that's good if you're Ronda Rousey or John Jones or Cain Velasquez, but it's not good if you're just an average guy on a card because nobody's going to go buy your stuff. So what percentage of what are you going to get? Which is true in the NFL also. By comparison, it's true in the NFL also. Some average lineman that you never heard of, just another guy on a roster, probably doesn't make the same kind of money off merchandising as Tony Romo does or Drew Brees. It's great. That's true. That part is true. But let's not make it sound like it's going to bring you millions of dollars and somehow offset the losses that you have with the sponsors that you have now.
That's a really interesting point. I guess a lot of the finer details sort of haven't been revealed yet with this Reebok deal. I'm just wondering, let's say everything's great and, the fighters get paid a decent amount for the sponsorships. Do you think it'll make it easier for them? I know some guys would obviously have those.
The thing is, you will never know because there will always be these company man fighters that will get some money, and like Conor McGregor's of the world, they'll come out and go, I'm very happy with the Reebok deal. I don't know what the hell everybody's bitching about. You guys should just start winning fights and you'll be fine. And then you guys will write a bunch of articles about it and cry about it for a while, and it'll go away. It'll go away 6 months from now. Nobody's going to remember any of this crap, and these guys are going to keep getting screwed because that's just how it works. Like, all this talking we do is useless because it doesn't push anybody to do anything. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't do anything. Like right now I'm talking to you, you're going to write an article, it's going to go out, and then 200 other websites are going to pick up from your broadcast and write again, unhappy manager bitching about this, and people will say, yeah, this is an outrage. And then they'll move on with their happy days, and these guys are still going to get screwed. That's just how the cookie crumbles, so to speak. There's nothing you can do about it. So I don't even know why we're talking about it. It's pointless. Because there's no cause for action. There's no entity, there's no group, there's nobody that speaks for these fighters. Nobody.
Well, yeah, that's a great point, Mike, but I think you're incorrect. It's good to, for the truth to be out there so at least people could know about what's going on. If we weren't talking to you, you wouldn't be able to let people know about what's going on. And I think that it's important. Knowledge is important. But, looking at the other side of the coin, what does this mean for companies like Bellator, World Series of Fighting, the other companies that, have the sponsors? Does this mean that fighters are more likely to get sponsors from those companies?
Yes. For Bellator, this is good news because now you have a lot of sponsors that couldn't sponsor fighters in the Bellator even if they wanted to, that are now able to come to Bellator. So on a personal level, I'm very happy because now I can call companies like Dethrone that couldn't sponsor fighters before because they were paying tax and they weren't allowed to, and say, hey, do you guys want to come support MMA fight? Because don't forget, a lot of these companies that do it, they do it to support the fighters. You know what I'm saying? Like, not a lot of them make huge amounts of profits from this. You know what I mean? Like, look at Dynamic Fastener, for example. That guy makes industrial fasteners. You think somebody watches a UFC fight, sees his logo, and then goes out and orders 1 million dynamic fasteners from him? No.
I still don't know what fastener is.
He does it because he likes the sport, and he knows that to these guys, when he gives them $2,500, that's like 15-20% of their total purse, and that helps. So that's why he gives them that money. Even Dethrone. Look at Dethrone, right? Dethrone's been in the MMA business for a while.
Mm.
Now, the guy who owns Dethrone, stupid rich. Right? Created Zappos.com, sold it for billions of dollars, has money up the yin-yang. He could spend the rest of his life in Cabo scratching his balls and never worry about any of this. But he likes MMA. He likes these guys. So he created the company, and he's been dumping money into it. And now he's just showing the door overnight. Have a nice day. Goodbye. You're out of here. All the relationships he's built, all the money he's poured into this business, gone. So, but on the flip side of it, he wants to continue to support MMA. Now he has an avenue. He can come to Bellator and start sponsoring fighters who weren't able to get T-shirts. In Bellator, the only company that sponsored fight athletes repeatedly with a T-shirt deal was Future Legend. And that guy's doing it also because he likes fighters. He doesn't make any money. Nobody watches it and runs out and buys, 200 Future Legend shirts. A lot of these companies, they do it because they like the sport. They want to support these guys because they know a lot of these fighters. They know what they make. They know how much they struggle. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think people really realize the level of struggles these guys go through. If they did, they would uprise, walk over to Las Vegas, and tear that building apart. Because when you sit down and you watch that Unleashed video, and Dana's walking around with bags of money and throwing it around like it grows on trees, and then you have a kid sitting around at home trying to explain to his kid that Santa Claus is not coming with a fractured rib because he can't fight for the next year. Come on, that's fair? Come on, that's not fair. That's bullshit. And there's plenty of money to go around to make these guys need to get to. People just need to lower their bottom line. But anyway, once again, we can talk about it all you want, and it's not going to change it.
Well, let's talk about something else. I mean, something that I've been curious about. One of your clients, Jason High, he's a guy that we haven't heard from in a while. He sort of got the rough end of the stick, and there was talks about appealing, I think it was the commission's punishment. I was just wondering if there's any updates with Jason High, and how's Jason High doing in general?
Jason High is on a suspension, not fighting, not earning a living, doing odd jobs to live out the suspension so you can go back to making money.
Did you guys end up appealing the decision?
Yeah, we appealed, and we thought we had a pretty good case. I mean, we actually had some of the commission members that were there and spoken to us after the event testify almost, what I felt was on our behalf, saying that, what they're saying is true, and the guy was very emotional, and he wasn't thinking clearly, and we thought we had a pretty good case. We were just asking to get a suspension reduced, from a year to like 6 months or 3 months or whatever. And then they came back and said no. So, it is what it is. What can you do?
Now, another one of your clients in Bellator is King Mo. He had another great performance at Bellator 131. King Mo is definitely one of the bigger names in Bellator. People love watching him. He always puts on great fights. And, the fight that he wants next is a fight against Tito Ortiz. We're just wondering, do you think that there's a likely chance that fight will come together? Because a lot of the fans would really love to see that fight.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I don't know. I mean, if it comes, we don't pick opponents. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, that's fine. The fight that Mo really wants is a fight against Rampage because he feels like he beat him the first time, and he got royally screwed, and he would like to avenge it. I mean, the thing with Tito is he hasn't fought Tito. He just got offended by Tito posting two gorillas fighting each other, and saying that was Mullen Rampage. And then some words were exchanged, but whatever. That fight happens, doesn't happen, nobody cares. But the one that he wants is the Rampage.
And in terms of that fight, obviously, when he fought him the first time, it was Bjorn Rebney at the helm of Bellator. Now it's Scott Coker. Have you heard anything from Scott in regards to possibly making that fight?
Well, everybody wants that fight. That fight did great on pay-per-view and did even better in rerun 3 months later for ratings. But Mo can't jump in there and fight himself, so.
Speaking of ratings, Mike, were you pleasantly surprised when you saw the ratings from Bellator 131 that made it the most watched, I believe, MMA event on cable?
Was I pleasantly surprised?
Yeah, were you surprised
Yes.
at all? Were you expecting,
Yes.
or were you expecting him to be that high?
I expected them to be high. I really think that the numbers came in really strong. The numbers came in really strong all the way across. The very first fight, which was Mo's fight, did 1.1 million views. That's a huge number for an opening fight, because usually, ratings pick up after midway through the first fight, closer towards the second fight, because people are tuning in. This thing was strong from the opening on, and then the main event delivered, a huge peak at 2.2 million views. So yeah, I think it was phenomenal. And I think what the ratings showed was, I think that the ratings for this event were the testament to what Scott was saying all along when he started putting this card together. And all the media was making fun of it, and they were talking about the theatrics and the WWE factor and this factor and that factor, and these guys are washed up and nobody cares to watch them fight, and all the keyboard warriors that have no life that sit around talking shit. 2.2 million people thought otherwise. And
Absolutely.
all the media that led up to that event was all about Tito and Bonner. 99.9% of media, and especially the non-endemic media, the mainstream media, was about Tito and Bonner. That was the story. That was the fight that sold the whole card. And then the rest of the fights just justified it for a larger audience. I mean, that formula has been around, used very successfully in Japan. Scott has used it very successfully in Strikeforce. You put on the marquee fight that a general public wants to see, and then you put on a bunch of fights for the hardcore fans to enjoy. You make a card that everybody enjoys watching, and the end result was high ratings. That's what it's all about. You know what I mean? People sit around and go, "It's very WWE. It's very WWE." Well, guess what? What's wrong with WWE? Have you seen their ratings? Their TV ratings? They're through the roof. Now, if Tito can pull 2.2 million views with Bonner, and the promotion around build the card up to the point, the hardcore fans saw the fights they wanted to see. The overall show did a 1.25 million views, 1.4 million with DVRs. The whole profile of the show was raised, right?
Yeah.
Now, you got a young kid like Mike Richmond that nobody ever heard of, nobody ever paid attention to, or nobody ever gave a shit about on a larger scale. He's now exposed to double the audience that would have ever watched him. You have Will Brooks, who's an up-and-coming young champion, who was exposed to double the audience that normally would see him. What's wrong with that? As a result of the theatrics and the WWE and all the other crap everybody's bitching about. Now, those guys can now go back to the sponsors, especially the new ones that are coming on board, and say to them, "Hey, these big tentpole events pull over 1 million views. Give us a little more money." They get more money, put it in their pocket. They become more popular. A person who otherwise may have not watched Will Brooks fight for a title now got to see him fight for a title. They liked what they saw. They said, "Hey, this kid is pretty good." Next time Will Brooks fights, they remember. They watch him. That's how you build stars. That's how you build stars. And that's what Scott does. He builds stars. What the UFC does is goes out and buys them. They bought Pride. They bought Strikeforce. They bought because they just want to throw them all in one and see who's going to float. You know, like the Spartan way. Throw them all in a pool, and whoever floats up will be great. You know what I mean? The Ronda Rousey, the Diamond Jewel, was not discovered by them. Was discovered by Scott. At the time, UFC was saying, women will never fight in the UFC again because they suck. Now she's the biggest star in the UFC. But that's how you build stars, by creating a product that appeals to a large audience. So you attract all of them, and they all watch it. And that was Scott's vision. And when he first announced the card, all the media jumped on him and started saying, boo, this is not what MMA needs. What does MMA need? TUF? Go look at TUF, 300,000 viewers. Nobody's watching TUF. I think that's just the family of the damn people on the show that's watching it. 60 family members, multiply it, that's 300,000 people. That's who watches the damn thing. So, it's easy to sit around and yap. You just have to look at results. So, if anything, this event was not just phenomenal because it did great ratings. It was a phenomenal because it was a realization of a vision that Scott had, and it justified it, and it showed results. And now, every time he does something from now on, everybody's going to be like, yeah, it's going to do well. We don't care, but it's going to do well because that's what it does.
Absolutely, Mike. Some great points there. And before we let you go, because we do really appreciate your time, another factor of that was, went up against UFC 180, which, had the big title fight, Mark Hunt versus Fabricio Verdum. Do you think that the ratings are an indication, that Scott Coker's vision was really going to make Bellator a major competitor for the UFC over the next year?
Well, to be fair, I don't want to sound like I'm just a guy who rags on everything the UFC does. To be fair, they were doing a pay-per-view event, so it's not really apples and apples being compared. Free TV versus you have to pay to watch it. And pay-per-views have been suffering as it is. So I don't think you can say, well, UFC 180 didn't do so well and this one did well because there weren't two different mediums.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Mike. Mike, we're going to leave it at that because...
But that aside, the thing is, that just happened to be a coincidence. That was the date when the venue was available. So that's when the event happened. What's important is not whether it went head-to-head with the UFC or it didn't go head-to-head with the UFC. UFC is doing what they're doing. Bellator is doing what they're doing. What it showed is that Bellator, with a limited star power, limited resources as far as athletes are concerned, was able to scramble up a show that got bigger numbers than some of the stars that have been built before are getting on Fox. That's what's important. What's important is that in this early stages of Bellator, before the stars are developed and before Scott really gets going, so you got a preview of what could happen 2 years from now when we got fighters that have gone through these big shows and have gotten built up, when Mike Richmond becomes the headliner, when Will Brooks starts pulling in huge numbers, the next Will Brooks starts coming up, Liam McGeary starts to get, big recognitions. Paul Daly just joined. See what kind of ratings he's going to start pulling. So my point is, what you got to see with the show was that there is still a market for MMA. There's still ways to generate ratings if you give people what they want to see. If you give a wide variety of options to a fan base, you know what I mean? Not just one, but wide variety. You had a kickboxing match, basically with 4-ounce gloves between two world-class kickboxers. You had a great 135-pound fight for a title contingency. You had a title fight between two top lightweights. You had the legends fighting in the main event. You had Mo, who's kind of a franchise all within himself. He could just, if you watch his promotion, it was just basically Mo is fighting, and that did 1.1 million views. You know what I mean? So it was a great combination. But this is all with just reshuffling and adding a few talents here and there and just really, just starting to kind of paint the canvas. Well, give it a couple of years and you'll see. So that's what people should take away from this, is that the future is looking really good.
Absolutely. And you know what? We're really excited to see what the future brings, obviously, with King Mo and Bellator, and especially Nate Diaz and his fight on December 13th. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, Michael. We'll leave it at that, and we'll definitely chat to you soon.
No, pleasure. Thanks.
There you guys go. An exciting lineup of guests. But what else has been exciting this weekend has been UFC 181. Cass, this has been one of those events where it just caused fans to jump out of their seats. So much excitement, so many great fights, so much to talk about.
Man, there really is. There's so much to talk about, from the main event, the CM Punk signing. Where do we even begin? Let's kick it off with CM Punk signing. What's the deal with that? CM Punk is officially going to be fighting in the UFC now, most likely in the middleweight division. What are your thoughts on that one, Dennis?
Man, you know what? You and me, we enjoy watching pro wrestling. I was completely taken back. I couldn't believe it. When Dana White was talking about CM Punk, I was like, yeah, he said he'd consider signing him, but I didn't think this would happen. Then, of course, now on Twitter, John Jones just tweeted, looks like I'm headlining WrestleMania 31. Apparently, his manager just tweeted that CM Punk said some stuff about Jones, some stuff about Jones, and Jones would love to welcome CM Punk into the UFC. And
Wow.
yeah, that would be a one-sided beating if we've ever seen one. I mean, look, the thing about CM Punk is with Brock Lesnar, he was an amazing wrestler. He was really good at one of the skills in MMA. With CM Punk, CM Punk's a pure pro wrestler. He's not a fighter. And sure, he's got some good submission abilities and he's done some jiu-jitsu, but as we've seen with other guys, even guys like Batista, who fought, sort of a bum in the heavyweight division. It's really tough to pick up those kinds of skills and to be high level at it. I mean, even Bobby Lashley, who was a good wrestler, struggling and just coming into his own in MMA now. I can't see where CM Punk would get the skills from to hang with the guys in the UFC, even the lower guys in the middleweight division. Cass, what did you think about this whole craziness?
Yeah, I'm sort of with you on that one. I'm actually just on bloodyelbow.com right now, checking it out. Our good friends at SB Nation, and the breaking news, it's not Robbie Lawler winning the welterweight title, which is a huge one in itself. It's the fact that the UFC has signed CM Punk. That just goes to show how big of a deal this is. And I was actually driving with someone the other day, and we were talking about CM Punk and, the whole comments, how Dana White said he's interested in chatting to him. And I think that was misleading because I would assume that the deal had been signed by then. And I was sort of breaking it down, like, I guess he'd have somewhat jiu-jitsu. Who knows how good or bad it'd be. I mean, he'd be in, I guess, decent condition because, being a pro wrestler, people may not understand that you have to be in decent condition to be a pro wrestler. So I'm sure he's he's a physical guy. He has some jiu-jitsu, like you said, he did some kempo. But yeah, absolutely, he's not a fighter. And like you said before, Brock Lesnar, Bobby Lashley, those are two guys who are fantastic wrestlers. As we know, wrestling is a fantastic base for MMA. You can get away with a lot even just by being a fantastic wrestler, even if you have very basic striking and grappling, so to speak. I don't know how CM Punk's going to really, compete with these guys, especially in the middleweight division. I mean, that's like the new lightweight division in the sense of it being a shark tank. I mean, you've got so many guys at the top. You've got Luke Rockhold, even Michael Bisping, Jacare, Musasi, Chris Weidman. There's too many to name at the moment, but that is an absolute killer division. And if CM Punk goes there, I mean, he better have some really finely tuned skills. I have no idea how he's going to survive in there, to be perfectly honest. Not to be a negative guy, I'm more excited than anything. This is huge. After a really shitty year for the UFC in 2014, they need a big star like this. And I think in MMA in general, both Bellator and UFC, they're really reaching. They'll pretty much go to any lengths to to make sure that they do get the ratings and they do put the asses in seats. I know Dana White was talking about how he'll never do a freak show fight, never wants a guy like James Toney, which is kind of crazy because James Toney was a very accomplished boxer. And then you've got CM Punk, who has never had an MMA fight in his life. I don't want to be rude and call this a freak show fight, but this is definitely a grab at ratings. And I'm not necessarily against it. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing, of course, is CM Punk had that big falling out with the WWE. Vince McMahon was on Stone Cold Steve Austin's podcast, said some stuff about firing him. I always thought this was a way for CM Punk to get the WWE to pay him more money, give him a bigger contract, play the two against each other. So I have no idea, except I have no idea what's going to happen here. From what we know about CM Punk, he's very basic at most skills. I think he's a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I've never seen him do any striking or heard about him doing any striking. The other thing is, we mentioned on Twitter, Bellator, they'd be slapping themselves right now. This is exactly the kind of stuff they'd be looking for, and I wouldn't be surprised because Brock Lesnar's contract is up after he wrestles The Undertaker at WrestleMania. I wouldn't be surprised if Bellator go back to Viacom and say, hey guys, we need this game changer. Give us the big check and makes one of the biggest deals in MMA with Brock Lesnar for him to go over to Bellator. I would not be surprised now for them to do that.
And it wouldn't surprise me to see Brock Lesnar in Bellator either. The only thing is, and Dana White's mentioned this, Bellator doesn't have the heavyweight division for Brock Lesnar. They don't have the guys that Brock Lesnar would necessarily find to be a challenge. I strongly believe, though, Brock Lesnar is a businessman, and nothing would surprise me about that, man. It wouldn't surprise me if Bellator, pull out the checkbook, he goes over to Bellator, and it's going to be one for Scott Coker that he'll have over Dana White. Nothing would surprise me at all about Brock Lesnar. I think most people were surprised that he even got into MMA when he did. So if he did go to Bellator, it wouldn't be too much of a shot. Did you see this at all, Dennis? Did you see?
No chance. Not a way. No freaking way, Casper. I didn't see him signing with the UFC. I didn't think he'd even consider doing it. Oh, look, CM Punk he was a great pro wrestler, very good pro wrestler. But even when he was a pro wrestler, he was never a magnificent athlete. He wasn't one of those guys that I looked at and I was like, all right, this guy, if he goes plays basketball, if he goes plays baseball, if he goes plays soccer, if he goes does whatever sport, he'll be a champion. And there is no way. Look, CM Punk, to me, looks like a regular, everyday guy. He worked over in these companies like Ring of Honor in Japan and developed a very interesting wrestling style. But he even himself barely made it in the WWE. I didn't expect it. The other thing, of course, is Brock Lesnar, with the skills that he had, he went outside the UFC and had his first fight before he was signed. To show off that he could actually hang in there. So CM Punk, without any fight experience, without any strength in any of the areas in MMA, and then, without having a first fight to even show us what he's made of, being signed to the UFC, like I couldn't even fathom it. I couldn't believe it. It just blew my mind. I don't know, Cass. What did you think? Did you think he had a chance to?
No, I thought if anything, maybe he'll go to Bellator. I mean, CM Punk's a really interesting guy. He's another guy that you never really know what's going to happen with him. He marches to the beat of his own drum. I thought if anything, he'll go to Bellator. He'll have a few, I wouldn't say easy fights, but the talent in the middleweight division isn't quite what it is in Bellator as to what it is in the UFC. So I think it'd be a much better fit if he did go there. You've got Spike TV. Obviously, that's a crowd that's very well accustomed to the WWE. The WWE were on Spike TV for a number of years. But to go to the UFC and have your first MMA fight in the UFC, I mean, even a year or so ago, there was talks of CM Punk against the Green Power Ranger. I mean, and the Green Power Ranger isn't exactly, heading for a title or anything like that. So that would have been a warm-up fight. Who knows if he'd even win that one? So to have your first debut MMA fight in the UFC, I mean, the word freak show definitely comes to mind. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I'm super, super excited to see when CM Punk makes his debut. We'll see, because I don't know if he's even in fighting shape. I mean, I think he competed around, the low 200s, 220, 210, something like that, maybe more. So if he's going to be making 185, that's about a 40-pound drop in weight. So he's obviously going to have to get in shape. He's going to tune up his skills. And then who are they going to put him up against,
Yes. Who are they going to put him against? Who do you put him against? Because, all right, he said some shit about John Jones, and now John Jones is like, I want to beat this guy up. All the top guys are going to be like, we want to beat this guy up. Huge payday, pay-per-view cut, the whole shebang, smash him, destroy him. All the WWE fans are going to watch it. But if you're the UFC, even with Brock Lesnar, they gave him a few tune-up fights. Who are you going to give him in the middleweight division? I could not see him beating not one person in the middleweight division, even the guys that are just coming into the ranks. Like I just don't know how he'd do it. What do you think? Do any names pop out to you guys? Who would he fight? Who do you put him up against?
Not at all. Not at all. And that's the thing. With a guy like CM Punk, who has a huge following, I don't see him fighting on the prelims. And I don't see him fighting on... You know what? He might be on a Fox card. You know what I mean? And especially the WWE, the way they've shot themselves in the foot. For those who don't know, WWE have a version of Fight Pass, but it includes pay-per-views. So basically, the WWE's pay-per-view business has completely dropped. Doesn't matter. Brock Lesnar, they are barely getting any pay-per-view buys. I think I read between 30,000 and 60,000 pay-per-view buys. So basically, now you've got a former WWE superstar, and people will once again want to buy the pay-per-views if he does go on a pay-per-view. So it's actually quite brilliant from the UFC's point of view. Here's all these guys who really didn't have any need to buy any pay-per-views, and now, CM Punk, if you want to watch him, you have to buy the pay-per-view. It's just a completely different company, a completely different sport. But going back to the middleweight division, I mean, I don't see him fighting on a prelims. I don't see him going really on an undercard. You'd have to put him in like a co-main event. I don't see him getting lost in that card. But if you're going to put him as a co-main or a main event, who do you give him? You can't middleweight, and it's CM Punk versus some guy that most people outside of hardcore MMA fans haven't heard of. So that's a real, I guess, predicament. But that's what makes this so exciting. I'm really excited to see how this plays out, and this is going to be like Brock Lesnar 2.0. And who knows in terms of popularity? I mean, CM Punk had a huge huge following in the WWE. Massive. And like, not only the casual fans, the hardcore wrestling fans, the guys who followed his career from, Ring of Honor and back in the day, all the indie fights, his fights against Samoa Joe back in the day when Dave Meltzer was rating him, with 5-star matches and things like that. So there's a huge following that will follow him into MMA. So this is crazy. We may very well see another big MMA boom, and it could very well be due to CM Punk.
Yeah, just lastly on the whole thing, the WWE are kicking themselves in the head right now because, they really, really need a guy like CM Punk right now, with Daniel Bryan being out with his crazy neck injury. Who knows when he'll be back? I think they were really counting on trying to get CM Punk back in there. Now he's going to be in the UFC. So he'll be gone, well into next year. And, who knows what kind of deal he'll get. Dana White probably, will be paying him probably around the $1 million mark just to fight, I guess, because it doesn't look like is very likely to win, but I guess he'll be drawing a lot of pay-per-view buys. But then if he does go in there and lose decisively and then goes back to the WWE, WWE would be like, oh no, like he just lost, kind of hurts his credibility a little bit. It's I can't believe it, man. I was dumbfounded. And the way it just happened, I think you and me were talking about it, where we were like, oh, we were expecting like a new fight card to be announced, like Alabama or something, it was so casual, like, oh, we just have a little announcement here.
Yeah, I thought the announcement was going to be like, the UFC is heading to Alabama, and most people around the world who aren't in Alabama will be like, all right, great, good for you, on with the card, because it was a fantastic card. And then out of nowhere, boom, CM Punk signs. This was absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and the time is now press conference. Nothing was announced. It's like, hey, let's get the world down here. Nothing's announced. And then like
a week later, you got Reebok. And then like a week after that, you've got CM Punk.
Just a little announcement here, guys. Like, oh, get the world down. Oh, we got nothing to talk about. And then, oh, by the way, just 2 minutes. Yeah, he's going to be fighting in the UFC now. He's left the WWE. He is right now. It's like unbelievable.
And the way they just like, panned over it really quickly afterwards. Like, anyway, back to the fight card. Everyone's like, wait, what just happened?
Oh,
and then Goldberg's like, yeah, that's all right. We got a fight coming up. People are like, I don't care. I want more on this CM Punk story.
Jesus.
But let's talk about UFC 181. Just a few of the things that we'll start on the prelim cards. There's just a few things that pop out. I mean, Raquel Pennington versus Ashley Evans Smith. This is a really fun fight. You had Raquel Pennington, who originally was supposed to fight Holly Holm, who was basically getting dominated by the fantastic wrestler Ashley Evans Smith. Ashley Evans taking the fight late notice. We saw a bulldog choke, one of two in the fight. Sorry, in the UFC 181. It was crazy. Raquel basically got it last second right at the end of the round. The round was finished. The referee didn't actually realize, but Ashley Evans Smith was completely out, face planted, and then they called the fight right there. So that was a great way to kick off the prelim cards.
That's right. And then, speaking of great prelims, Josh Salmon, people haven't seen that guy fight for a little while. I think he went through a bit of adversity there, but he was fighting Eddie Gordon, the tough winner. And I don't know if that many people were giving Josh a chance in that fight. Eddie's looked pretty good up to now thus far, but, Josh landed a killer head kick KO. And it was one of those KOs where if you're thinking about getting into MMA and you see that KO, you double think it and maybe just go, nah, it's all right. I'll just keep watching MMA, because when Eddie got hit with that KO kick, he was lying on the ground biting into his mouth guard. It was a serious KO, and hopefully Eddie's okay. Cass, what did you think when you saw that KO?
Yeah, that was brutal. Josh wasn't exactly winning that fight. It really took me by surprise, as I imagine it took Eddie by surprise. Eddie Gordon's a guy, he's really sort of campaigning. You see him on Twitter all the time. I really expected big things for him, big Eddie Truck Gordon. And yeah, when that kick landed, wow, that's insane. I think the post-fight press conference is probably going as we're speaking. Wouldn't surprise me if Josh Saman got that knockout. I mean, it's basically down to him or Todd Duffy. I wouldn't be surprised if either guy, sort of shared it and both got the performance of the night. But, I'm really happy for Josh Saman. I mean, he's definitely gone through some adversity in his life. I feel bad for the guy. He lost his girlfriend, I believe it was a year ago. Really sucks. And you know what's crazy, Dennis? I actually had nightmares last night where my girlfriend died. So hearing them say that on the broadcast, I was like, yeah, I really feel bad for this guy. But I'm happy that he got the knockout. And awesome highlight reel knockout for Josh, who's not exactly known as a finisher either.
Yeah, I had a dream about Batman last night. But getting back to
Did
the
you?
card, Uriah Faber, he was on our show and we were talking about Francisco Rivera, the fact that people didn't know Francisco very well, that Uriah, why are you on the prelims? Why are you fighting Francisco? But of course, he mentioned that I fought everybody there is to fight. I want to fight on the prelims, more visibility, makes sense. In the fight, Francisco actually put up a very, very good fight. It looked great. He was really doing his thing. Uriah was throwing these sort of one-off hooks, and in a lot of parts, Francisco looked dominant. But then it was the eye poke of death, Cass. The eye poke of death. What did you think about this eye poke of death?
Yeah, that sucked. I mean, when it happened, I didn't really see Uriah land anything. I was a little bit confused as to what sort of set up the bulldog choke. And when they showed the replay and it was the eye poke, I was like, man, because this is a fight where Uriah didn't at all look in control. He looked in control for maybe the first 30 seconds, and afterwards, Francisco was really doing well. I mean, he arguably won the first round. In the second round, he was doing really well as well until that brutal eye poke. I mean, this is one that I believe is probably going to get swept under the rug. I don't think much is going to happen with it. Francisco doesn't seem like the kind of guy to complain, and he basically took it like a champ. He was very classy in defeat, didn't really complain, didn't say anything, but what can you say, man? That really sucks. Essentially, and, big fan of Uriah Faber. He's a fantastic fighter. He's not the type of guy that, I mean, everybody needs to prove themselves, but he's not a kind of guy where, to really doubt his skills. But yeah, I think he really did win that fight due to that eye poke because he was losing up until that point.
Yeah, that's right. And then you look at the situation, you go, this sucks. Like Uriah, he got the win, but a lot of fans are going to be like, what about that eye poke? And then Francisco, he'll be complaining because, hey, I was doing well up in that fight, but it's not their fault. If the blame goes on anyone, it has to be on Mario Yamasaki. He's a great referee, great umpire, but he missed that eye poke. It's up to him to keep an eye on the fight and make sure that if that eye poke happens, he separates the fighters. I can't blame Uriah. He probably didn't see it, and he was going for the finish as Uriah does. So at the end, it was one of those meh fights where Joe Rogan was interviewing Uriah after the fight, and they were talking about the eye poke. Uriah just really realized it then and there, and it wasn't awkward or anything, but it was a bit like nothing gained, nothing lost. Sort of like, eh.
Yeah, you're right. It doesn't push Uriah Faber really any closer to a title or really anywhere in the division. And the fact is, a lot of people expected him to win anyway. So it was one of those fights where, okay, Uriah's not going to fight his teammate and Cruz is tied up. Let's give him somebody. They gave him Francisco Rivera. He beat him like most people expected, but there was still controversy. And he didn't look amazing in doing it. So it's a bit of an unfortunate one. Let's talk about the main card. Let's talk about the opening one, Tony Ferguson versus Abel Trujillo. What do you think about this one, Dennis?
Man, Abel, when I saw Abel and he came out and just started landing those punches on Tony, I thought it was going to be all over. There were parts in the fight where I thought he was going to finish him off. Tony Ferguson is one of the most exciting jiu-jitsu games for me in MMA. The way that he uses his legs when he's down in the bottom going for submissions. But yeah, Abel really got exhausted. And in that second round, Tony really took over and used his wrestling, used his amazing jiu-jitsu. I was really impressed. If I take away one thing from that fight, I was just impressed with Tony's heart. The fact that he could take all those punches and then come back and win it. Even though it was his game plan, it looked like Abel was throwing bombs at him. What did you think, Cass?
Yeah, look, Tony Ferguson absolutely has a heart. He is honestly one of my favorite fighters to watch. The guy, to me, is somewhat mesmerizing. He's very, very creative in his attacks. He doesn't mind going to the ground. He'll drop down to the ground and go for crazy things like leg locks and guillotines and everything. I find him really, really exciting. And Abel's kind of hit a bit of a ceiling. He's very, very powerful. He definitely has knockout power. Lives up to his name of killer. He's also a very muscly guy, and he does tend to fade. So if he doesn't put guys out sort of a little bit early, he does tend to fatigue. And I think he's kind of he fights like a young fighter. He kind of goes out there, balls to the wall. I think time will tell if he will develop that veteran's mentality of pacing yourself and fighting maybe a little bit smarter. I don't mean that in any kind of rude way. But Tony Ferguson is absolutely a veteran. He's been out there. He's been out there against some good guys. He scored that controversial win against Danny Castillo. Well, in fact, I don't think many people think it's controversial, I think, other than Danny Castillo. But he's a veteran. He's a smart fighter. And I actually expected this to happen. I thought if Abel doesn't win in the first round, Tony definitely will. I thought maybe it'd be ending via decision. But in the end, it was a submission rear naked choke. So, really great win for Tony Ferguson. Ferguson, that's another guy, man. He's really coming up in the lightweight division. I believe he's on a bit of a streak at the moment, and who knows? He's actually on a 4-fight win streak. So we'll see. If he wins another 2, he may be really close to title contention.
Yeah, that's right. Fergie's a bit underrated. I agree with you, Cass. He's one of my favorite guys to watch as well. So I think people are underrating him a little bit. Let's give him a bit of credit. The guy's really tough and he's really exciting to watch. And it's great to see guys like him in the lightweight division because it's just lots of great matchups, and that's what we want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Never a dull fight with Tony Ferguson. Todd Duffy versus Anthony Hamilton was next. Man, Todd Duffy, what can you say? He did it again. Before we go into the fight, this guy has had a pretty astounding career with lots of ups and downs. It's been pretty well documented, but for those that don't know, he came into the UFC 2009, destroyed Tim Hague in 7 seconds, was the owner of the fastest KO. People thought, and he was huge. He was a lot bigger back then. He did go through a phase where he was on TRT. Then afterwards, people thought, man, this is the guy to beat Brock Lesnar. He versed Mike Russo, got knocked out in one of the most bizarre, lopsided fights. He was destroying Mike Russo the whole fight, and then Mike landed a random, seemingly not so powerful punch in the 3rd round. Down goes Todd Duffy. Disastrous fight against Alistair Overeem, toiled in the outer leagues, and here he is back in the UFC with a 33-second KO. This is, 5 years later? And of course, he had that crazy disease. So it's really full circle for Todd Duffy. Really happy for the guy and really happy that he may come back and actually make a big run in the heavyweight division. As you've said many times, Dennis, doesn't take too many wins in a row in the heavyweight division to be fighting for the title.
Yeah, that's right. He's got great name recognition. I think he went through some kind of disease as well, some really rare one that he was talking about.
Parsonage Turner, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I think what happened to him was he got a lot of attention when he wasn't ready for it. I think he also had some kind of thing with the UFC where they released him, like he said something to the Dana White or he said something to the guys. Something got mixed up there, but it's good to see him back. And the good thing is he's still really, really young. He's like 29, 28 years old. So it's good. He's got his head on straight and he had a great win. I think both of those guys, they had a bit of a crazy stare down at the weigh-ins. So he landed a couple of extra punches when he was on the ground before Herb could sort of wave him off. So there you go.
If you check out our Twitter at SubmissionAUS, we've got a picture up there of Todd Duffy in 2009 when he knocked out Tim Hague, staring down the camera after his knockout win, and it's pretty much the exact same way he celebrated here. So I can't tell you how much this feels like deja vu, and I'm really happy to see Todd Duffy back in the UFC and his career back on track. More heavyweight action, Travis Browne versus Brendan Schaub. Now, before this fight even started, Dennis, how did you think this one was going to go?
Yeah, Brendan they have a good show where they talk about MMA, but I've never been a huge fan of him in terms of fighting. I've always thought he was a little bit overrated. And Travis Browne, one of the better heavyweights in the division, I thought it was going to be a landslide. So going into this one, I thought Travis was just going to bulldoze through him. What did you think, Cass?
Yeah, I honestly gave the edge to Travis Browne. I just thought the guy had a lot more promise. A lot of his hype was derailed by Fabrizio Verdum, who's absolutely no slouch. But I think with Brendan Schaub, there was a phase where he was really calling out legends, guys like Krokop and I think Frank Mir and Nogueira, and he had about a 50-50 success rate. He obviously lost to Nogueira, got brutally knocked out by Ben Rothwell. A lot of people joke about how, Ben Rothwell took his soul. He beat LeVar Johnson, and even that was a very, very strange fight where, very controversial. He beat Matt Mitrione, who, as much as I like, he's not exactly elite. And he was still sort of finding his way in the heavyweight division. Lost to Andrei Arlovsky, and then today lost against Travis Browne. I just thought Travis definitely had the better record. He obviously brutally knocked out Josh Barnett, and I just didn't know if there was that much that Brendan Schaub could do to him. Obviously, Brendan Schaub excels in the ground game, and as we saw, Josh Barnett, who's a fantastic grappler, couldn't even, begin to get Travis Browne to the ground. Although we did see Brendan Schaub get him down to the ground, but even there, Travis Browne sort of flourished. One thing, though, in the Fabrizio Verdum fight, one of the biggest downfalls of Travis Browne was, A, his cardio seems to just disappear instantly, and B, he didn't set up any of his shots. He was a little bit stubborn, he was a little bit arrogant in the cage, and he basically just swung wildly. In this fight, we saw a lot more composed, a lot more calm Travis Browne. At times, I was kind of wondering, if he was maybe doing a little bit too little, and I'm not trying to be down on the guy, because he obviously had a fantastic victory, and especially against Brendan Schaub, who you'd think the advantage would be on the ground, and that's exactly where Travis beat him. But, I'm wondering, how his change is now that he's fighting at the Glendale Fight Club. We saw his friend recently, Jake Ellenberger, get completely destroyed by Kelvin Gastelum. And, I've noticed a lot of guys that do fight at the Glendale Fight Club, sometimes they tend to hang back a little bit. And that's one thing that I noticed with Travis Brown. He was hanging back. He did set up his punches a bit better. He was faking. But I noticed he was also really, really, really tired in the post-fight speech. And this is only a one-round fight. So, while it's a great win for Travis Brown, the jury's still out. And I'm very curious what he can do in the heavyweight division and how his involvement's going to continue.
Yeah, it was definitely a fight that didn't really show us that much about his improvements. Absolutely agree with you. And especially the end there was a little bit weird. He was getting that mount very easily after rocking Brendan and then had his back. And he was, throwing these, little punches to get the fight stopped. And then both guys had something to say to each other because they were talking trash or something throughout the fight. The thing with Brendan is, for me, is he just never really evolved for me. He always has the same bag of tricks. And in this fight, it just looked like everything, he looked startled. He looked like mentally he wasn't there, already defeated before he even got in there. And yeah, just not a very impressive performance. And the fight before that against Arlovsky wasn't very impressive either. So yeah, not much impressive stuff from Brendan lately.
I would actually disagree in terms of Brendan Schaub's evolvement. I think he did evolve because after a few knockout losses, he realized that his chin wasn't his strong point, and he couldn't really be just a striker. So he's obviously spent a lot of time training jiu-jitsu. We obviously saw him coming out with, I believe it was Henna Gracie. I just think, though, that, in the heavyweight division, he's going to have trouble with the guys that punch hard. And obviously a guy like Travis Brown, who was a lot bigger than him, I don't think Brendan's ever faced a guy that big who kept him at a distance, and who does have great takedown defense and just is an athletic guy. I think Brendan's going to struggle against those guys. And I hate to use the word gatekeeper, but Brendan's got to prove a lot if he wants to avoid that title.
Yeah, and I mean, he mixed in the takedowns. What about his striking? I could always predict what strikes he's going to throw. It's always the same overhand. He ducks down. It's always the 1-2. He really needs to mix in some strikes in there. What about kicks? What about different techniques? I don't know. I agree with you. He's becoming a gatekeeper. He needs to, who knows? Maybe he needs to have a look around other camps. See, I don't know, just play around with some stuff. Just not be so predictable, I guess. I don't know.
And that's the thing. He ran in really recklessly. I mean, his hands were down and he got caught with that uppercut. So I think defense is in order for Brendan Schaub. Let's move on to the first title fight. And this card was one of those, like,
oh man,
lightweight title shot, lightweight division, which is huge. Anytime there's a lightweight title fight, I'm in. Welterweight, exactly the same thing can be said. And to get both of those on the same card, it's like, oh you UFC, oh you, what a treat.
And we're not used to it as well. Like, we've had some dreadful UFC cards this year. So it's like, let's have a look at this card, for example. Like the Travis Brown Brendan fight, that could have been like a main event of like a fight night, and that would have been it, like, and up to there, so many great fights. It just it blew my mind. I wasn't used to this luxury. I was like, what's going on here?
No, it was a fantastic card, top to bottom. Sorry, still has nothing on UFC Sydney, but 11 finishes compared to 8. Get out of here. But no, look, Anthony Pettis versus Gil Melendez. Just my sentiments, I honestly predicted Anthony Pettis was going to come out the champion. I think the main question was, how's he going to be after all these injuries, after all this shelf time? People making jokes about Anthony shelf time Pettis. Good call, internet. Good call. But as we've seen, Anthony Pettis doesn't really struggle when he comes back. He doesn't really have the problem of ring rust, as we saw against Benson Henderson. And I really thought this was going to be Anthony Pettis' fight, as long as he can stay in range, as long as he can, unload those kicks, as long as Gilbert Melendez doesn't, turn into an ugly fight, which he did, especially in the first round. I was very impressed with Gilbert in the first round. He didn't really do what the fans would have necessarily wanted him to do. He was very methodical. He was all about that takedown, put him up against the cage. I still think it was extremely exciting, even though Gilbert Melendez was kind of pushing him against the cage. It was one of those ones where anything can happen at any second. And I just think that with Gilbert Melendez, with his style, he's obviously a great boxer and he's a great wrestler. I just think that for a guy like him who He's one of the best lightweights in the world, arguably. Definitely one of the best lightweights in the world. I think he's kind of getting a little bit old. The thing is about his style, he tends to have wars, whereas Anthony Pettis tends to destroy guys pretty quickly. And I think those wars are starting to catch up with him. Had he come to the UFC a few years ago where BJ Penn was champ, he very well may have beaten BJ and, been a UFC champion. And this layoff, this long layoff, obviously they had that contract dispute where Gilbert Melendez actually signed with Bellator, and then the UFC reeled him back in. They did the Ultimate Fighter. I mean, that feels like years ago. I can't believe it was only earlier this year. So it's not exactly helping Gilbert Melendez in terms of time. And I really definitely predicted that Anthony Pettis is going to win this one.
Yeah, I agree with you, Cass. And he mentioned that he was feeling a bit old after the fight. But when I was watching that fight, I thought Gilbert was going to win it. I'm like, wow, this is an amazing. Yeah. This is an amazing fight. He's putting that game plan in perfectly. And those exchanges were so exciting. It was such an exciting fight. It was just a really great fight. Both guys just looked really good. Gilbert Melendez, had a lot of really great moments. And the way that Anthony Pettis jumped down on that guillotine and finished it, I mean, there's been some really good guillotine finishes, Ricardo Lamas over Dennis Bermudez, but, it was just, it blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind. It was such a great fight. I enjoyed it so much, as a member of the media, but also an MMA fan. It was a great fight. And those exchanges and even Anthony Pettis with the sneaky kicks, he's just such a great athlete. I'm really excited to see what happens with him as champion. It's really exciting. The layoff, I think made a lot of people forget about who Anthony Pettis is and what he could do. And it wasn't very good for Gilbert because, he sort of lost a year out of his career sitting around doing the Ultimate Fighter. I'm sure that he wished he could have fought more, especially, as he's getting older. But I think people are reminded how exciting the lightweight division will be in 2015.
I agree with you. That first round was awesome, and Gil did really well up until obviously getting beaten. It was a great game plan that he used. He pretty much did exactly what he needed to. Do you think this warrants a trilogy? Do you think we'll see these? Oh, sorry, not a trilogy. Do you think we'll see a rematch?
I'm not sure. That's the thing, because he did finish him, so maybe Gil needs to win a couple more fights before he gets back up there. But I think that if he gets back up there, I think the UFC will definitely give him another shot at fighting Pettis. And also, I think he got a pretty good contract with the UFC, so they'll be using Gilbert as somebody that makes the division interesting for fans. So we'll see what happens there. But I'd love to see them fight again. And oh man, just amazing, just a great fight. Just gives me a good feeling thinking about it.
Yeah, look, the lightweight division has a logjam, so I don't see Gil Melendez necessarily getting that title shot soon. You got so many guys coming up. You've got Rafael dos Anjos, you got Nate Diaz, Khabib Nurmagomedov. There's so many guys in there going for that title shot. But I definitely see Gil Melendez getting another shot if he remains impressive, because that wasn't a bad fight at all. I'd watch that any day. Now let's talk about the main event, because I think we're running out of time. Robbie Lawler, Johny Hendricks. Controversy City. Dennis, what was your pick? What did you think was going to happen going into that fight? Who did you think was going to win?
Well, first of all, before we get into this fight, Hendricks' trainer went on and spoke about how he had a torn bicep, something that we all knew, and also a broken leg. I think that was a bit new to me. And
broken leg, really?
Yeah, that's what he said. It was very strange. I haven't heard that before. Maybe he meant that he had like a knee injury or a leg injury. But he said he had a broken leg. He's like, and he was half of the man in that fight. So, and what I thought when he said that was, man, you're putting a lot of pressure on Johny Hendricks right here, because he was injured and he, beat Robbie. And now you're saying, well, he's not injured now, so he should just run right through him. I don't know. Mentally, I wouldn't want to hear that if I was Hendricks. But yeah, going into this one, I thought Hendricks was going to beat him. What about you, Cass?
I agree. I think a lot of people got caught up in the Robbie Lawler story, which is a great story in on itself. The guy's been fighting for so long, and if he finally, ended up capturing the title, I think a lot of people were hoping for that. I thought, you know what? Screw the hype. I think Johny Hendricks is going to win regardless. I think a lot of people are counting him out, and that's what happens. MMA is very much a hype game. If you sit out on the shelf for a long time, a lot of people forget about you, and that fight was quite a long time ago. I think it was in March. It's been almost a year now. I still thought Johny Hendricks was going to win. I kind of had a feeling he might even knock out Robbie Lawler in the first or second round, because he's no joke. Johny Hendricks is the real deal. What transpired was very interesting. You saw... I would say a very dominant performance by Johny Hendricks, and then when that decision was being read out, you heard I'm trying to think. It was 48-47. It went Lawler. And then 47-48 to Hendricks. And then when they said 49-46, I'm like, okay, yeah, clearly Johny Hendricks has it because, he was dominant for more rounds. There was a lot of close rounds in that fight. And then when they heard Robbie Lawler, man, talk about a reaction. That was insane. What was the first thing that went through your head, Dennis?
I can't believe it. I said, I can't believe it. I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that judge's decision turned out like that. I can't believe he's the new champion. I could not believe it. And mind you, we can't really go for certain people, but that last round, I didn't really appreciate Johny Hendricks' game plan, just sitting around there, having up against the fans. That kind of really annoyed me. And it was a bit of a frustrating fight for me because I felt like Lawler looked a lot worse than their first fight. He was very tentative. Yeah. He just paused a lot. He didn't go for it. He just stood up on that fence and just let, Johny have his way with him. Combinations weren't there. It was like, it was a lot worse. It's probably one of the worst Robbies we've seen in the last few fights. Like, where was, the slick combinations that we know him for? It was very weird, very, very weird. And I couldn't believe it. I went crazy. I couldn't believe it. It was unbelievable. Cass, what went through your mind? What did you think?
I thought, when you play Mortal Kombat and someone's playing Sub-Zero and they keep freezing you over and over again, that's what it felt like when I was watching Robbie Lawler. In the first fight, he was in it from bell to bell, other than the last 2.5 minutes of the 5th round where Johny Hendricks got that takedown. This is really strange. He came out of the gate, guns blazing, really looking to put the hurt on Johny Hendricks. I was like, oh shit, he might finish it in the first round. This is crazy. He was going for those knees to the stomach, knees to the torso. And I got it. I was like, okay, he's looking to make this a 5 round or expecting that it may go 5 rounds, and he's looking to hurt Johny Hendricks, take away his gas tank. Fair enough. In the second round, completely different Robbie Lawler. It was like a transformation, frozen, stuck to the ground. It's like the tree roots came out and just devoured his feet. And we saw that for round 3 as well. So Johny Hendricks definitely won those 2 rounds. The first one was a real toss-up because while Robbie Lawler was more aggressive, there was definitely parts where Johny Hendricks was controlling him against the cage. I don't think it was until the second round that Johny actually got the takedown. And then you have the 4th round, which really could go either way. I guess that's the one that Robbie won. And then you have the 3rd round, which I would clearly go to give Robbie, because that last second finish was insane. This is why people love watching the sports, what MMA is all about. Absolute heart, aggression, tenacity, all those awesome words from the sweet vocabulary. So I get, I was sort of thinking after the fight, like, how do they score? And I guess it would come down to round 1, round 4, and round 5 to Robbie. Most of those rounds you could really argue, but for the judge to say 49-46, meaning that Robbie won 4 rounds, I'd really love to see that guy put under the microscope and someone be like, which one? Point. Which one? How did this happen? Which one did you score for Robbie? Which 4 rounds? I'm very curious about that.
Oh yeah, it's a disgrace to MMA judging. Could be one of the worst scored cards that we've seen this year. Just unbelievable. In my scorecards, I had Robbie winning the first round and Robbie winning the last round. So I have no idea how he won that fight. Other thing is, Johnny's coach in the corner said, go out there and, dominate him. It's a close fight. You need to win this round. Yeah. I don't know if that actually swayed the judges, because I don't know if they were sitting next to him, because I don't know what these judges are thinking. And I don't know if someone's coach goes, oh, hey, you got to win this round because it's a really close fight. You might lose if you lose it. And some guy's like, well, scoring. Like, because, these judges, we just don't know who they are. And a lot of them don't even know what they're doing. Some guy might be like, oh, wait a minute. Well, if this guy says that, then maybe he's right. Maybe it is close. I don't know what happened. But, what Johny Hendricks did in that last round, I don't know what he was thinking. When they were standing up, Johny Hendricks was killing him with his combinations. He was throwing leg kicks. He didn't need to push him up against the fence with his head in between his legs for the whole round. He could have just kept going and tried to finish out the fight strong. But I just don't feel like having him up against the cage with his head in between his legs was the right way to go. I think the right way to go was go out there, put together some good combinations, maybe take him down, but put him up against the fence, do some dirty boxing. But don't just sit there and hold on to that takedown the whole time. I think Johny Hendricks thought, all right, I'm going to do what I need to just to win this round. And I think that
Yeah.
was the wrong mentality going into that one. I think, sure, Lawler, in my books, lost the fight. But in the same time, I think Johnny Hendricks, and by the way, I agree with you. This was a really dominant performance by Johnny Hendricks. He looked really, really great. But just that last round, I felt like, that was the wrong thing to do. And in a way, though, I'm happy about the decision because it's going to show a lot of these guys who like to put people up against the fence and do nothing that, hey, you guys are going to start losing fights now. You're not going to be able just to put someone up against the fence and stall out a fight anymore. You have to do stuff. So in that regard, I'm happy. In the regard that it's one of the most ridiculous scorecards from that guy that I've ever seen, I'm disturbed to know how the hell he got up there. But yeah, it was a minefield of emotions. It took me back. Cass?
Yeah, you know what? You make some really interesting points. I kind of get why Johnny Hendricks did it. Look, at the end of the day, let's be honest. The sport has changed. It is very much about points and just getting the win. And that's obviously a wrestling mentality, and wrestlers are kind of dominating the sport. Or there's a lot of them in there. A lot of coaches are wrestling based. So I get Johnny Hendricks trying to just make sure he wins the round. And sometimes if he say stood up with Robbie and got knocked out, there'd be a lot of people out there going, why didn't he just take him down? Why didn't he just use his wrestling? Why did he do something risky like that? So I get why Johnny was doing that. I just don't think that anyone expected Robbie to just go so berserk in the last 30 seconds, with those elbows to the body. I mean, he literally, his way of getting up from underneath Johnny Hendricks was, I'm going to hit him as hard as I can until he can't take anymore and he gets off me. And that's basically what happened. And then the last 15 seconds, he just unleashed on Johnny Hendricks. I mean, talk about stealing rounds. Or technically he didn't really steal it because Johnny didn't do much in that round. So I get Johnny's game plan, but you make a good point, If you leave it in the hands of the judges, and if you try and play it safe, especially in the last round, you might get screwed by the judges. And I wouldn't say screwed because this was a close fight. And like Joe Rogan and Mike Kogan said, I'm gonna have to sit down and rewatch this fight. Much like again, Johnny Hendricks versus GSP, another fight where I was like, yeah, Johnny Hendricks won this one. And then I rewatched it and I was like, nope, he actually didn't. If you go by the rules of mixed martial arts, GSP won 3 rounds, Johnny won 2. So, and again, it's a fight that could have gone either way. So, honestly, man, UFC 181, it was a fantastic, fantastic card. And it's one of those ones where afterwards you get drained and you need a nap. You need a big sleep because it's that much of an emotional event.
Yeah, that's right. Before we jump off the subject, Cass, one more thing to discuss. Who fights next? Because here you've got Rory McDonald. He's been walking through guys, and he wants a title shot next, right? But Robbie's already beat Rory McDonald, and it was quite recent. Are people interested in seeing that fight? Then you have Johnny Hendricks. This fight was very, very, very close. Do you do an immediate rematch? If you had to choose between the two, which one would you go with and why?
I'd go with Rory McDonald. I think this guy has so much momentum right now, and people have been wanting him to fight for the title for so long. I'm not saying that I'm not a fan of rematches, but it all depends on timing, and I don't think this is the time for it. I think Robbie has earned his shot, and he's been so dominant in this division. It's a case of if you don't give him the title shot now, who's he going to verse? Who else is there for him to verse and beat? And it's like, at what point do you give him the title shot? I get it. This is something that's a little bit unforeseen. I don't think the UFC are really going to care. I think they're happy with Robbie Lawler. He's a good champ. It's not one of those cases where it's a guy where, I don't know, he's a boring wrestler and they were like, please don't win the title, and then he does, and the UFC are like, oh, yeah, we need someone else to take the title from him. Robbie Lawler's a great champ. He's a really exciting guy. He's going to be selling pay-per-views. I don't think the UFC have any problem with Robbie Lawler being champ. Just give him Rory McDonald. There's a good story there. There's a good story of Rory McDonald, say, being the young guy who got beaten by the wily veteran Robbie Lawler. He's been on this road and he's improved, and now he's back to get that title. I think it's all about what sells. And I think if you have Robbie Lawler versus Johnny Hendricks 3, this fight, it was a good fight, but it wasn't an instant classic like the first one. I really don't think so. The first one was back and forth, bell to bell. This was Johnny Hendricks being very, very dominant, and then Robbie Lawler kind of being dominant in the first and the last round, and then getting the win. So Rory McDonald any day. What do you think, Dennis?
Interesting there, because you were selling me on that fight. I was going to say Johnny Hendricks, but I guess a rematch with Rory McDonald does make sense as well. I guess, I don't know. I haven't been a big fan of Rory McDonald's fighting, although his last fight was really impressive. I guess their fight for me wasn't as exciting. I mean, Robbie did a good job, but yeah, very interested to see what happens. I think, yeah, Rory does deserve the title shot, and who do they put him up against next? So then let's put him in, and then interesting to see what you do with Johnny Hendricks as well, who would be pretty devastated right now, to say the least.
He would be really devastated. He's probably going to get a tattoo somewhere on his arm, like, really? Twice now? Really? Like, and the thing is, with Johnny Hendricks, he's probably not going to be far away from title shot anyway. He's a former champion, so he'll probably only need one win. And let's say, I think he'll probably get a title shot after one win, honestly. I think whether it's Rory McDonald and they have, Rory versus Johnny Hendricks, or whether it's the rubber match against Robbie Lawler, we're going to see that fight happen sooner or later.
And then you got our boy Hector Lombard waiting in the wings, just, about to fight Josh Berkman. If he wins that fight, all of a sudden... Yeah, I think Hector's, and that's a fight he can win as well, so it's an interesting one.
I think Hector's a little bit further. I think, man, he's an absolute killer. I think if they play their cards right, they can have Hector fight Josh Berkman, and then maybe another 1 or 2 fights. They could even be gimme fights in the welterweight division, and then have him main event in Melbourne in the 50,000-plus seater stadium, Etihad Stadium, and main event for the welterweight title. So I think that's the way to go, but that's my 2 cents. I think we're all out of time. It's been a pretty long show this week. Big thank you to our guests, obviously, Mike Kogan, Mark Hominick, CB Dollaway, and, of course, our good friend Al Iaquinta. Really, really thankful to those guys for taking the time to chat with us. We'll be back next week. More guests. Don't forget to follow our Twitter, Submission AUS. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube account. Technique of the Week every damn Wednesday. New technique. Dennis, any last parting words to the fans?
Guys, who do you want to see fight for the championship next? Do you want the American Psycho, Rory McDonald, to do it? Or do you want to see... Canadian Psycho. There you go, even worse. Or do you want to see Johnny Hendricks have another go and do a trilogy with a man? Let us know in the comment section below. Otherwise, we'll catch you next week, guys. It's been great.